Hey everyone, welcome back to Paranormal M. Hope you're doing well. Before we start, I just want to say that some people have told me these stories help them fall asleep. So if you know someone who has trouble sleeping, feel free to share the channel with them. And if you enjoy the video, please give it a like. The first story is about a staycation that went completely wrong when a woman started noticing that something about the hotel didn't feel right. Alright, let's get into it, and I hope you sleep well tonight. I want to tell you about something that happened a few years ago when my ex, Rohan, and I were still in our early 20s. We'd planned a little staycation for ourselves, nothing extravagant, just a short escape from the city. I asked him to handle the hotel booking because I didn't want anything too obvious showing up in my payment history. At the time, I trusted him completely. We'd been together for over a year, and I honestly thought, he's got this. We met near the station in the afternoon and took a cab to the hotel. The whole ride, I never even asked for the name of the place or where exactly we were going. I just assumed he'd picked somewhere decent. But as the drive kept going, maybe 35-40 minutes, I started feeling uneasy. At first, I told myself it was just traffic, just the city dragging out the trip like it always does. Still, something about it felt off. By the time we got close, I noticed the surroundings had changed completely. The roads were quieter, there were barely any buildings around, and the hotel stood in this strangely isolated area with overgrown trees and almost no signs of life nearby. I remember stepping out of the cab and just staring at the place. It was huge, easily a 60-room property, maybe more, but it looked worn down and abandoned in a way that made my stomach tighten. It had this faded grandeur to it, like it had once tried very hard to be luxurious and then just stopped. Inside, there was this giant lobby with a chandelier and polished floors and all the usual dramatic hotel details. But it was unnervingly empty. No families, no tourists, no staff bustling around, no sound except the echo of footsteps and the low voices of a few other couples checking in. That was it. No one seemed to be leaving either. And even then, even with all the warning signs piling up, I kept trying to convince myself that I was overthinking. We got our room keys, and one of the staff members led us upstairs. As we walked down this long, dim corridor, it really hit me that this massive hotel was almost completely empty. Not quiet in a peaceful way, quiet in a way that makes you feel like you shouldn't be there at all. I could feel my chest tightening with every step. Then we got to the room. The second I walked in, something in me just recoiled. I can't explain it better than that. It was like every instinct I had was telling me to leave immediately. The room was drenched in this dark red decor that somehow made everything feel heavier. The bedsheets had marks on them, the carpet looked dirty, and there were cockroaches skittering around like they belonged there more than we did. I was already upset, but what made it worse was this connecting door to the next room. It was locked, but the gap around it was so wide that I could actually see movement on the other side, which meant they could probably see us too. I was furious with him at that point, but I was also embarrassed to say how scared I felt. I thought maybe he'd brush it off, maybe say I was being dramatic. So I stayed quiet. He told me to relax and went to take a shower. I lay down on the bed for a moment, trying to calm myself, eyes closed, facing away from the bathroom. And then, very clearly, I felt the mattress dip, like someone had climbed onto the bed beside me. I really thought it was him. I turned around and said his name, but no one was there. The room was empty. The shower was still running. When I finished, I was done pretending everything was fine. I was angry, tense, and completely on edge. He suggested going downstairs to get some food, but even while he was gone, I stayed near the door because I didn't feel safe anywhere else in that room. I also became convinced there were hidden cameras somewhere. I made him help me check everything when he came back, and I looked too, but we couldn't find anything. Still, I never stopped feeling watched. Finally, I said, as calmly as I could, that I wanted to leave. I didn't care if it was inconvenient or wasted money or made no sense to anyone else. I just wanted out. To his credit, he agreed. We booked a cab, packed our bags, and headed downstairs. I remember taking one last look around as we checked out, and the place still felt just as wrong as it had the moment we arrived. What made it worse was the way a couple of staff members glanced at each other and smirked while looking at us. It sent this final chill through me. The second we got into the cab and pulled away, I felt like I could breathe again. And when we finally reached the main road, with traffic and people and noise all around us, I felt this huge wave of relief. I didn't care where we went next. I was just grateful we had listened to that instinct and left. I have something in my life that I still cannot fully explain, and honestly, I have been carrying this question with me since I was a child. When I was around 8 or 9, I saw a photograph of a woman for the first time. The moment I looked at her, I felt something so immediate and so deep that it startled me. It was this overwhelming sense that I had known her forever. Not in an ordinary way either. It felt like love, like safety, like belonging. It was almost like recognizing someone my heart already knew, even though my mind had no explanation for it. As the years went by, that feeling did not fade. It actually grew stronger. I started feeling more and more connected to her, and the bond I felt was deeply motherly. It was warm, protective, familiar. Every time I saw her face, it felt like she had always been a part of my life somehow. A couple of years later, I came across that same photo online. This time, I decided to learn more about her. That is when I discovered something that shook me even more. She was from a completely different region of my country, far from where I grew up, and she had passed away about 4 months before I was born. She was somewhat well known in her area, which made it easy enough to find information about her. But the strange part is that no one in my family knows anything about her. No one around me ever talked about her. There was no family link, no shared history, nothing I could point to as a reason. And still, her presence always felt real to me. For years, I truly felt as though she was with me. I do not know how else to describe it except to say that I could sense her. It was as if she made sure I knew she was there. I am 20 now, and this has remained one of the biggest mysteries of my life. The connection I felt with her was never frightening. It was beautiful, pure, and full of tenderness. She was a stranger to the world around me, but to me, she never felt like one. Lately, though, something has changed. Since around 2025, it has been almost a year since I last felt that same strong presence. I do not sense her around the house the way I used to. Before, it always felt so clear, as though she wanted me to know she was near. Now there is only silence, and I find myself wondering why. Even now, I still love her. I still talk to her. I still tell her about my life, and sometimes I cry in front of her photo. The bond I feel has never really left me. If anything, the question has only grown larger with time. So I keep wondering, is it possible to feel such a strong connection, such deep love and belonging, with someone you never met, someone who died before you were even born? I want to be clear that I had a happy childhood and loving parents, so this does not come from loneliness. That is why this has always felt even more mysterious to me. And as unbelievable as it may sound, a part of me still longs to reach her somehow. I still want answers. I still want to understand why this bond felt so real, so powerful, and so alive. Because maybe, if I could somehow connect with her, even just once, the biggest question mark in my life would finally make sense. Hi, my name is Isabel, and this is something I've carried with me for most of my life. It happened when I was about 10 years old, and even now, after all this time, I still can't explain it. I think that's part of why I need to tell it. Ever since that day, I've had this constant feeling that something is nearby, something quiet and patient, just watching. When I was a kid, my parents always told me to say a prayer before bed. They believed it protected you, kept nightmares away, that sort of thing. I usually listened, every night, without fail. But one evening, I just didn't do it. I wasn't upset or anything, I just didn't feel like it. So I went to sleep like that. That night, I had the strangest dream I've ever had. Back then, we lived on a private seaside estate where my parents worked. There was a huge house up on the hill, and we stayed in a smaller cottage farther down. Even as a child, I was sensitive to certain places. Some rooms felt normal, and others felt wrong. That property had a heaviness to it I never really got used to. In the dream, I was inside the main house, sitting on a big sofa in the front living room. Across from me were a couple of pale armchairs, and nearby there was this large revolving door that led into another part of the house. Close to the kitchen, there was a long table decorated like a party had been set up. Balloons, plates, little treats, everything. It was supposed to be my birthday. A bunch of women from my family were there, talking, laughing, fixing the decorations. The whole scene should have felt happy, but it didn't. I remember realizing I couldn't get up from the sofa. I was completely stuck there, just watching everyone move around me. Then, one by one, they all came over and said something like, "We'll be back in a minute." And they walked through the revolving door into the next room, leaving me by myself. The second I was alone, everything changed. I turned my head and noticed someone sitting in one of the armchairs. It was a man, or at least it looked like one. He was extremely tall, maybe well over 6 feet, with this unnaturally long frame. He had no face, not a blank face, not shadow covering his features. I mean, no face at all. His skin was completely dark, almost like it swallowed the light around it. He was dressed in a black suit with faint stripes, polished formal shoes, a deep burgundy tie, and a dark hat with a band that matched the tie. In one hand, he held a cane, and at the top of it was this green stone that caught my eye right away. He didn't move at first. He just sat there, slowly tilting his head from side to side. Then he stopped, and I knew he was looking straight at me. I couldn't move. I couldn't even shut my eyes. It felt like every part of my body had frozen. Then he stood up, but not like a normal person. His body bent awkwardly, like his bones were out of place, and he leaned on the cane as he came toward me. Every step looked unstable, like he might collapse, but he kept coming closer. When he finally reached out toward me, I forced my eyes shut, and then I felt this sudden rush of wind. When I opened my eyes again, the chair had slid back into place, and he was gone. A moment later, the women came back through the revolving door, laughing and chatting like nothing had happened, like I had imagined the whole thing. Then I woke up. I tried to brush it off. I was a kid, so I told myself it was just a bad dream. I went up to the big house like I usually did, because I liked watching TV there during the day. I brought my dog with me and turned on the television in that same living room from the dream. I sat on the floor, right near the armchairs, and from the moment I sat down, I had that same feeling again. That awful feeling that somebody was in the room with me, even though I couldn't see anyone. After a while, I went back downstairs to grab some sweets and left my dog upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard a huge noise above me, like a heavy piece of furniture had been shoved or knocked over. I ran back up immediately. When I got there, I stopped cold. The revolving door was slightly open. One of the armchairs had been turned to face the sofa directly, exactly the way it had been in my dream, and my dog was standing there, barking at the chair like there was someone in it. I remember feeling this wave of panic go through my whole body. I went inside, shut the door, pushed the armchair back where it had been before, and sat down on the floor to wait for my parents. I didn't want to be alone, and I didn't want to leave that room either. I just stayed there, terrified. When my parents finally came home, I ran to them crying and told them everything. I can honestly say I was never quite the same after that. Even now, as an adult, I still sleep with the blanket wrapped tightly around me. I hate leaving my feet uncovered, and I hate having my head too exposed, because some part of me still feels like that figure could be there beside the bed, crouched down, watching in silence. That fear never fully left. If anything, it grew with me. And what stays with me most is not just the dream, or the chair, or even the way my dog reacted. It's the feeling that whatever I saw that night didn't begin and end there. Like it noticed me too. I still don't know what it was, and I still wonder whether anyone else has ever seen something like that. You know, a few years after I began working as a medium, I went to stay at a friend's home for several days, and almost as soon as I arrived, I started feeling unwell. It was strange. I felt drained, uneasy, and by the second day, I was already telling my wife, "Something about this house doesn't feel right. It's making me sick." My friend, who owned the house, told me that ever since we'd arrived, the electrical problems had been worse than usual. She said appliances in the house had always acted up from time to time, especially the media players. She'd already replaced several of them over the years. Naturally, that got us wondering whether something in the house was reacting to my presence. Not long after that, I started noticing what looked like a pale white haze near the kitchen ceiling. Whenever my friend was home, it seemed to grow stronger, almost like a soft cloud gathering above her. I couldn't ignore it. Then, night after night, I became aware of a young girl trying to speak to me. At first, I brushed it off as dreaming, but on the third night, I woke up with a name still clear in my mind: Michaela. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a dream at all. That evening, when my friend came home from work, I told her gently, "I think there's a young girl here in the house." We were standing in the living room talking about it, right near the television, when suddenly the volume blasted all the way up and the channels started changing wildly on their own. For a second, I honestly thought maybe the dog had rolled onto the remote. But no. We grabbed the remote and tried everything. Lower the volume, switch the TV off. Nothing worked. It just kept going. And I'll be honest with you, I started laughing. Not because it wasn't serious, but because I was completely fascinated. It really did seem like this little spirit was saying, "Pay attention to me." My friend, though, was far less entertained than I was. She gave me a look that said this was absolutely not the time for amusement. I told her, "Michaela is trying to get your attention." In the end, the only way to stop the noise was to pull the plug from the wall. Later on, I spoke with my guides and decided to reach out to the girl directly. That's not something I take lightly, because appearances can be deceptive in spirit work. Just because something presents itself as a child doesn't always mean that's what it truly is. But as I connected more deeply, I became convinced this really was a young girl who had died and somehow remained attached to the house. What I felt from her was not anger, not evil, not malice. She simply wanted to be noticed. She wanted the family to know she was there. Once I explained that to the homeowners, they began acknowledging her. They'd speak to her kindly, almost as though she were part of the household. And after that, things calmed down. A few years later, we visited the house again. My friend told me she hadn't had any major disturbances since then, but every morning before leaving for work, she still said hello to Michaela. She believed it helped, that it made the girl feel included somehow. That day, I had a strong feeling Michaela would make herself known again, and she did. I saw the white mist return. The dog suddenly began barking at a blank wall and refused to move away from it. No matter how much we tried to call him off, he stayed locked onto that one spot. Even when we put him outside, he went straight to the window so he could keep looking back in at the same area. After that, I asked a friend to join me in meditation. Together, we invited our guides to step in and help. As I felt Michaela's presence around us, I asked, "What do you need? How can we help you?" That was when I realized something deeper was wrong. She didn't seem to understand that she had died. She was holding on to that house as though it were still her home. At that point, I knew I was dealing with an earthbound spirit. I also sensed that the guides needed more energy in the room to help her move on, so I asked that some of the people present be used in that process. A moment later, two women in the kitchen, who had simply been chatting together, suddenly burst into laughter. At first it seemed ordinary, but it kept building and building until they were laughing uncontrollably, tears streaming down their faces. It wasn't unpleasant. In fact, it felt joyful, almost radiant. I chose not to interrupt it. As that energy rose, I felt the guides step closer. Then I became aware of them communicating with Michaela. In my experience, guides and helpers often work with souls who haven't fully crossed over, especially those who are confused or still attached to places in the physical world. Their role is to bring clarity, comfort, and the light needed for that soul to move on. And then I saw it. Michaela was gently led away. I can't tell you exactly where she went. I only know that after that day, she was never felt in the house again. The moment it was over, the laughter stopped just as suddenly as it had begun. The room changed. The energy lifted. The guides were gone, and so was the little girl's presence. That experience stayed with me because it reminded me of something important. People do not have the power to send spirits on by themselves. We live in the physical world. We don't fully understand the spirit world, and we certainly don't control it. Help can come through guides, through grace, through energies beyond us, but I would be very cautious of anyone who claims they alone can remove a spirit from a place. Sometimes, all a soul needs first is to be seen. You know, for years my dad kept insisting that strange little things would happen around our house. Nothing dramatic, just odd stuff. He'd leave a room, and somehow the lights would be back on later. Sometimes the washing machine would start up when no one else was home. Little things like that. My sister used to say she'd hear footsteps moving through the house when she was there alone. My mom always had a more practical explanation. She'd remind us that my sister used to sleepwalk and mumble in her sleep, rambling about school, friends, random things that made no sense. And honestly, I was usually the skeptic in the family. I figured it was probably bad wiring, people misremembering things, or just the reality of living in a duplex where every sound travels more than you think. And the funny thing is, weird little moments like that seem to follow us from one house to another, especially in the last family home before my sister and I had fully moved out as adults. Still, I never really bought into any of it. Not completely anyway. Not until the last time I was ever in that house by myself. By then, my dad had already moved in with my stepmom, but he kept the old place for a while to finish renovations before selling it. Most of the time it sat empty, though my sister or I would sometimes stay there if we were visiting from the city. That final visit for me was just supposed to be practical. I was there to grab the last few bins of my stuff. Old awards, yearbooks, childhood leftovers. The kind of things you never bother taking with you the first time you leave home. When I walked in, I could tell the power had gone out at some point. The microwave was flashing. The oven clock was flashing too. Both were stuck at 5:12. I remember noticing it, but not thinking much of it at first. Then I went upstairs and saw the little digital clock in the guest room doing the exact same thing. Same flashing time. That was when it started to feel a little strange, because usually those clocks reset differently once the power comes back. But this one was just frozen there too. And then I looked at the grandfather clock in the hallway. It had stopped at 5:12 as well. That was the moment I just stood there and laughed to myself a little, because it felt so weirdly specific. I texted my dad right away, mostly because I thought he'd enjoy the irony of me finally feeding into one of his stories. And his reply was basically, "Yeah, that happens all the time. Drives me nuts." So I packed up my things, brought everything back to my apartment downtown, and didn't think too much more about it. A few days later, I started going through the boxes. At the bottom of one of them, I found my old Darth Vader alarm clock, which honestly was still a great find. I hadn't used that thing in probably 20 years. It was in rough shape too. The screen was damaged enough that the numbers had kind of burned into it permanently, like that old calculator screen stain. I picked it up without really thinking, and then it hit me. The time ghosted into the display was 5:12, exactly the same as every clock in that empty house. And the part that really got me was that when I first pulled it out and looked at it, the actual time was only a few minutes off. Close enough that for a second it felt like everything had lined up just to make the moment land. Nothing like that has happened to me since. But that was the first time I seriously thought maybe my family hadn't been exaggerating all those years. Maybe there really was something we couldn't quite explain. And even now, my dad says little things still happen. Different house, different neighborhood, years later. Hey, I want to tell you about something that's been weighing on me ever since my family and I moved into this house a few weeks ago. I haven't even been here the whole time, really. Not long after we moved in, I spent nearly 2 weeks in the hospital dealing with some personal mental health stuff. So even saying I've lived here feels a little strange. And before I go any further, I need to say this clearly. I know how easy it is for people to dismiss stories like this. But some of what's happened to me wasn't just a dream. I've had moments while fully awake where things moved, doors shifted, and I even felt something touch me. I should probably mention one other detail too. Right before the move, I got a porcelain doll. I know people love attaching creepy meanings to dolls like that, but I never did anything ritualistic with it, never tried to cleanse it or anything like that. It was just a doll. The first dream happened the very first night I slept here. It started out as a mess of random scenes, packing boxes, arguing with family, getting help from people I barely recognized. But the house we were leaving in that dream wasn't any place I've ever seen. It was huge and confusing, like a maze, with this heavy feeling in every room. At one point, I was sitting in a bathtub in this dim little bathroom, and the whole place felt wrong. I remember thinking, very clearly, I need to get out of here. Then suddenly, we were arriving at the new house. I don't remember the drive, just the moment I walked in alone. In the dream, it looked exactly like the house I live in now, except it was filthy, abandoned looking, completely wrecked. And right in the middle of the kitchen floor was the severed head of a fox. Its body was laid out on the counter nearby. I panicked instantly, ran outside to tell my family, and then woke up. Even now, remembering it gives me this awful, ritualistic feeling I can't really explain. Another dream came not long after, and that one felt even more real. I was in my bedroom, in my actual bed, everything exactly the way it is in real life. Then I saw this dark figure standing right in front of me. I tried to move, but my whole body felt dead, like every limb had gone numb. A second later, there was this violent banging on the walls around me, so loud it felt like the room was shaking. I forced myself to move somehow, stumbling out of bed and trying to get to my parents' room. But I kept falling over, like my body wasn't listening to me. It felt like that struggle went on forever. When I finally reached their room, it was pitch black, and that same shadowy figure was standing over them while they slept. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. Then I woke up. The third dream was shorter, but somehow worse in a different way. I had fallen asleep on the couch. I woke up, but not really. I still couldn't move or speak. In the faint light, I saw who I thought was my dad standing nearby. At the time, I believed it was him, but later I realized the hair was all wrong. My dad's hair is mostly gray and brown, and this figure had dark black hair. I tried to move and rolled off the couch. The second I hit the floor, I woke up again in the exact same position, still frozen. It happened over and over, maybe 6 times, maybe more. I'd think I'd woken up, then realize I hadn't. It was one of the most unsettling things I've ever felt. But the dreams aren't the only reason I'm scared. The next thing happened while I was at my desk working. I heard this slow creaking sound behind me and turned around to see my bedroom door opening by itself, inch by inch. No one was there. I got up, shut it, and sat back down, but I remember feeling more irritated than scared in that moment, like whatever it was had crossed a line. The worst part happened one night when I was asleep. I was stuck in another one of those looping dreams, fighting to wake up, fighting to move, and then I felt something grab my foot and yank. Not brush against it, not tap it, yank it. I shot awake and grabbed my flashlight, hoping so badly one of my cats had done it. But both of them were on the other side of the room, curled up together. Since then, I've been sleeping with the light on. I know that might sound ridiculous, but honestly, it helps. And ever since I started doing that, the dreams and the strange moments haven't happened as often. Still, every now and then, one of those looping dreams comes back, and it leaves me shaken all over again. So that's what's been happening. I'm trying to stay grounded, trying to be honest with myself about what could have a rational explanation and what I just can't explain yet. But I won't lie to you, it's been exhausting. I'm tired, I'm tense all the time, and I feel like I'm always bracing for the next thing. I went down a rabbit hole recently about Gaurav Tiwari, and I'm not kidding. This story has been sitting with me ever since. If you haven't heard of him before, Gaurav was one of India's most recognized paranormal investigators. He founded the Indian Paranormal Society, and for years he traveled to supposedly haunted places, looked into strange cases, and tried to approach everything with a level head. What made him stand out was that he wasn't just chasing spooky stories for the thrill of it. He actually tried to bring logic and investigation into a world most people either fear or blindly believe in. And that's what makes what happened to him feel so unsettling. Because this wasn't a man who seemed easily shaken. He had spent years around stories of hauntings, spirits, fear, all of it. He had even debunked a lot of cases people thought were paranormal. But at one point, he reportedly told people close to him that something dark was affecting him. He said it felt heavy, like it was draining his energy and changing the way he felt. That wasn't just some dramatic line he threw out there. According to those around him, it was something he genuinely seemed disturbed by. Then, in 2016, he was found dead, under circumstances that left a lot of people deeply unsettled. The official conclusion pointed toward suicide, but for many people who followed his work, the story never felt fully settled. There was no clear explanation that gave people peace, no simple answer that made everything fall neatly into place. And because he had already spoken about feeling affected by some kind of negative force, that detail only made the whole thing harder to forget. Some people believe it was a tragic personal struggle, something internal that those around him may not have fully seen. And honestly, that is possible. Even the strongest people can carry battles no one else recognizes. But others look at his life, his work, and those comments he made before his death, and they wonder whether he came across something during his investigations that stayed with him in a way he couldn't explain. That's really why this story lingers. It lives in that strange space between psychology and the unknown, between what can be explained and what maybe can't. And whether you believe in the paranormal or not, it leaves you with a chilling question. Was this simply a heartbreaking human tragedy? Or did one of India's most famous ghost hunters come face to face with something he couldn't outrun? I still don't really know how to tell this story without sounding completely unhinged, but something happened to me last night that I can't shake. I got out of work late, later than I should have, and by the time I reached the station, the rain was coming down in sheets. I barely made the last train. I remember rushing through the doors and slipping into the very last carriage just as it pulled away. And right away, something felt strange. The whole carriage was empty. Not mostly empty, completely empty. No commuters, no one half asleep in the corner, no one staring at their phone. Just me. At first, I didn't think too much about it. I was worn out, honestly. I sat down by the window, listened to the rain hitting the glass, and I must have drifted off for a minute. Then I woke up, and suddenly, the carriage was full. Absolutely packed. Every seat was taken. People were standing in the aisle, shoulder to shoulder. But the part that really got to me was how quiet it was. No one was talking. No phones buzzing. No bags rustling. Nothing. Just silence. I remember blinking hard, rubbing my eyes, trying to wake myself up properly. And then, just like that, it was empty again. Completely, impossibly empty. That's when I noticed him. There was a man sitting across from me. I'm telling you, he had not been there before. He was just sitting there, still as stone, staring straight at me without blinking. Then he smiled. Not in a friendly way, not even in a normal way. And he said, very calmly, "After midnight, this carriage doesn't belong to the living." I actually gave this nervous little laugh, because what else do you do when someone says something like that? I figured he was trying to scare me, so I played along. I said, "Really? So what happened here?" He leaned in a little closer and said, "The night before last, someone died in this carriage." And I don't know why, even now, I cannot explain why I said what I said next. But I smiled back at him and said, "I know, it was me." The second those words left my mouth, I felt this awful drop in my stomach, like I'd answered something I was never supposed to answer. His expression changed immediately. That smile of his just disappeared. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. My hands were already shaking, but I picked it up anyway. And this voice, low and hollow and far too clear, said, "I didn't die the night before last." Then it said, "I died on that train 43 years ago." I went cold all over. I looked up from my phone, slowly, barely breathing. And the man sitting across from me was gone. Just gone. But I could feel it then, plain as anything. Someone standing right beside me. Close enough to hear them breathe. Close enough to know they were watching me. I haven't gone near that train since. But here's the part that stays with me. The part that makes my skin crawl every single night. Around the same time, without fail, my phone rings. Same unknown number, same voice, just waiting for me to answer. I swear this really happened. I'm not dressing it up or adding bits for effect. It's one of those things that stayed with me because I still can't explain it any other way. This started in December 2020 in West Yorkshire, England. I was 11 at the time, sitting in the living room playing Among Us, which basically had everyone hooked back then. I was on the sofa near the big front window, the one that looks out over our front garden and the road. I'd been playing for a while when I suddenly stopped. I honestly can't tell you why. Maybe I was bored, maybe I just felt drawn to look up, but something made me put my phone down and glance outside. And that's when I saw him. There was a man walking along the path in front of our garden, and straight away he looked completely out of place. He was tall, probably around 6 foot, and dressed in this very old-fashioned way, like something from another century. He had on a dark top hat, a black 3-piece suit, a long coat, and shiny pointed shoes. In our area, seeing someone dressed like that would stick out instantly, so my attention locked onto him right away. What unsettled me most wasn't even the clothes. It was his face. His expression was flat, cold, almost blank, like he wasn't fully present. He didn't seem like a normal person just out walking. He moved slowly and calmly past the garden, then stopped for no reason I could understand. He turned and stared into our garden. Not just a quick glance either. He stood there for several seconds, looking around with this strange expression, almost like he was irritated or confused, as if something about the garden wasn't how it was supposed to be. That feeling hit me hard. I remember this chill running up my arms and into my scalp while I just sat there frozen, watching him. Then, all at once, he looked up. Straight at the living room window. Straight at me. The second our eyes met, I dropped behind the sofa. It was pure instinct. I stayed down there for a few seconds, barely breathing, then slowly lifted my head to look again. When I did, I saw him moving up the driveway at the side of our house. That terrified me even more, because the only people who ever really went up there were people who lived nearby, and I knew I'd never seen this man before. We'd already been living there close to a year by then, and he definitely wasn't someone from the street. I panicked and ran upstairs to my older brother, who was the only other person home. I told him what I'd seen. At first he laughed a bit and thought I was overreacting, but he could tell I was genuinely scared, so he believed me enough to come check. He grabbed the nearest heavy thing he could find, and we went slowly back downstairs together. We got to the kitchen by the back door, checked outside, and there was no one there. The door was locked. No sign of anyone. I was still badly shaken when my mom got home, so I told her everything too. She's never been completely sure what she believes when it comes to paranormal things, but when I described the man properly, her whole reaction changed. She got this worried look straight away. Our house was built in the 1800s, and she said that a man dressed like that would have fit the period perfectly. We ended up talking about how maybe he'd once lived there, and maybe the reason he looked so confused staring at the garden was because, to him, it wasn't his garden anymore. It had changed. Everything had changed. A few years later, around Christmas 2023, something happened that brought the whole thing back in the worst way. My mom was fascinated and asked to see it. The woman showed her this old black and white family photograph, and my mom called me over because she thought I'd find it interesting too. I looked at it casually at first, and then, the second my eyes landed on the man standing in the middle, I felt everything in me go cold. I knew that face. I just stood there staring because it was him, The same man I had seen outside our garden 3 years earlier. Same face, same presence, same horrible feeling. Only this time he was standing in a family photograph from the 1800s. I told my mom straight away, and even now I can still remember the feeling that went through me in that moment. It was like all those years collapsed into 1 second. That experience is the reason I believe there are things we can't explain. Before that, I wasn't sure. After that, I couldn't really doubt it anymore. And the strange part is, that wasn't the end of it. My family still talks about odd things happening in that house. Sounds, feelings, things people have seen out of the corner of their eye. I still live there, and the house has a dark history too. We've heard stories about harsh treatment, children being beaten, and other bad things that happened there long before we arrived. So when I tell this story, I mean it. This is the one that changed everything for me. The man I saw outside my garden in 2020, the man who looked lost and almost offended by what he was seeing, turned out to be in a photograph taken more than a century earlier. And I still don't have a normal explanation for that. So I want to tell you about something that still sits with me, and honestly, I have never been able to explain it in a way that makes it feel any less real. A while back, my mom and I went to visit family in western South Dakota during the summer. My grandmother lives way out near the Wyoming line, on this quiet ranch that is probably half an hour from the nearest little town. She's in her 70s and lives alone in a small house she had built several years ago. The house itself has a very open layout, which I think somehow made the whole experience worse. There's one main bedroom, a loft area above, and then the kitchen, dining space, and living room all sort of flow together into one big room. Off the laundry room, there's a back door that leads outside toward where the vehicles are parked. At night out there, it gets unbelievably dark. There are barely any lights around, and once the sun is down, the whole place feels cut off from everything. My mom and I were staying there for a few days, and one night, somewhere around 11:30 or maybe closer to midnight, my grandmother had already gone to bed. My mom was sitting on the couch in the middle of the room, and I was off to the side in a chair, just scrolling on my phone. Then out of nowhere, we heard the back door open. Not slam open, not rattle, just slowly open. My mom and I immediately looked at each other, and then toward the laundry room. We both went completely still. It sounded exactly like someone had just come into the house. A second later, we heard footsteps. They started in the laundry room and moved slowly forward, coming through the house along the natural path someone would take if they had just walked in from outside. The steps sounded heavy, like a big man walking with purpose. And mixed in with the footsteps, there was this faint sound of breathing. Deep, slow breathing. I remember feeling my whole body lock up. The footsteps kept coming until they stopped right beside the couch where my mom was sitting. And in that moment, neither of us said much. We just looked at each other with that same stunned expression, like we were both silently asking, "You heard that too, right?" After a few seconds, we got up and carefully walked toward the back door. We checked it, shut it completely, and made sure it was locked. I can't even tell you what I expected to find. I just knew we both heard something move through that house. I barely slept the rest of that night. What stuck with me almost as much as the sounds themselves was my mom's reaction. She was visibly shaken at first, and that was not normal for her. Later on, she tried to act like everything was fine, like maybe it was better not to give it any more attention, but I could tell it got to her. The next day, she went through the house and saged it. My mom and grandmother are both deeply religious, but we never told my grandmother what happened. I honestly don't think she would have really taken it in. Since then, I've stayed at that house alone a couple of times, and every time has felt deeply uncomfortable. I would sleep up in the loft with headphones on, and I even hung a blanket over the opening just so I wouldn't have to look down into the dark downstairs. Even then, there were moments when I thought I could hear faint voices below me. Nothing clear enough to make out, just enough to make my skin crawl. At this point, I won't stay there alone overnight anymore. I just won't. What has stayed with me most is that it wasn't just me. My mom heard it too, at the exact same time, step for step. And that wasn't the only place where I felt something I couldn't explain. In 2024, I spent about a month staying with family in Tuan Nam, Vietnam. While I was there, I lived fairly close to a river that locals spoke about like it had a dark presence around it. My girlfriend then, whose name was Lynn, lived across that river, and every time we crossed the bridge to get to her place, she would get visibly tense. You could see the fear rise in her face before we even got halfway over. I also spoke once with a woman who lived right along the riverbank. She knew a little English, enough for us to talk. She told me she would sometimes see things she couldn't explain, and she spoke about it with this calmness that honestly unsettled me even more, like she had simply accepted it as part of life there. She also said the river had been used during the war as a place where bodies were dumped. While I was there, I sometimes felt this heaviness whenever I got near the river or had to cross it. It wasn't something I could point to or prove. It was just this deep, sudden feeling of unease that seemed to come from nowhere and settle over everything. When I put those experiences together, the night at my grandmother's house and the feeling around that river, it has only made me believe more strongly that there are things in this world we do not fully understand. I really do think there is both good and bad in this world, and maybe that doesn't stop with people. Maybe there are good spirits too, and maybe there are bad ones. I can't prove any of that. I know that. But I do know what I heard that night, and I know my mom heard it too. And some experiences stay with you because, deep down, part of you knows they were real. I still think of myself as an atheist, honestly. I grew up between two very different worlds. One side of my family was deeply, intensely religious, very strict about one God and one truth. My mom, on the other hand, believed in whatever kind of spirituality made sense to her at that point in her life. So I was raised around a lot of belief, but none of it ever really became mine. That said, there was one house I lived in with my mom where some things happened that I still cannot explain. The moment that sticks with me most is actually a very small one, which almost makes it stranger. It feels silly every time I tell it. I was about 15, maybe 16, lying in bed in my room late at night, talking on the phone with my school counselor. My cat, Miso, was curled up on my chest while I talked. My bedroom door was shut, the window was shut, and the blinds were those thick wooden slat ones, heavy enough that they never moved unless someone actually touched them. In the middle of the conversation, the bottom left corner of the blinds suddenly snapped upward, like someone had grabbed it and thrown it. Not swayed, not trembled, not shifted a little. It flew up. And I know how that sounds. I know there is probably a neat, rational explanation people would want to offer. But before I could even process it, my cat bolted upright on my chest, arched her back, and hissed straight at that exact spot by the window. She reacted instantly, like she had seen something too. That part is what has stayed with me all these years. Not just what I saw, but that she saw something as well. As ridiculous as it sounds to be haunted by a moving blind, that moment made me feel less like I had imagined it. And it was not the only thing in that house. We had this old gramophone in the living room, and one day it started playing by itself while my mom and I were both there in the room. No one had touched it. It just came to life on its own. Another time, we came home and found footprints on the kitchen ceiling. Not on the floor leading somewhere, on the ceiling. Actual footprints, like someone had walked upside down across it. I still do not have words for that. Then there was the night I had a group of friends over. There were maybe 8 or 9 of us. We were teenagers doing exactly the kind of stupid thing teenagers do, sneaking drinks from my mom's liquor cabinet while she was at work. We were all in the kitchen grabbing food, laughing, being loud, and then we all walked together into the lounge. As we came in, we noticed a sheet hanging over the upstairs banister. That was strange immediately because none of us had gone upstairs. And then, right as we stepped into the room, the sheet dropped. At the same moment, the lights started flickering, and my cat came tearing into the room absolutely frantic, screeching, scrambling, practically launching herself at the walls. It was instant chaos. What I remember most is the silence. No one screamed. No one joked. We all just froze and sat there, completely quiet, like the whole room had gone cold. Then, one by one, everyone called their parents to come get them. I still remember the boys who had been acting fearless all night, suddenly running full speed up the driveway the second their rides arrived. I've had this strange feeling for as long as I can remember, like something was wrong with the very first house we lived in. My mom used to tell me that when I was a baby, I would constantly stare into the corners of her bedroom and cry for hours. Not just fussy baby crying, but proper, panicked screaming, like I was terrified of something no one else could see. She never understood it at first. Then one night, when she got up to make my bottle, she saw something in the room that frightened her badly enough that she decided we had to leave. And the weirdest part is, the moment we moved to a different house, I stopped crying completely. A few years later, when I was about 3, I was the total opposite of that scared little baby. I was chatty, full of energy, always running around and playing with my toys. But that was also when I had an imaginary friend. At least, that's what everyone called her. I named her Marie. I used to play with Marie all the time. Before nursery, after nursery, right before bed, she was always there. But the thing about Marie was, she never felt like the kind of imaginary friend people laugh about. She always wanted me to do naughty things, things I knew I shouldn't do. It carried on like that for nearly a year. Then one night, I woke up and saw all my toys scattered across the floor. My mom had tidied everything before I went to sleep, so I knew it wasn't right. I climbed out of bed, looked straight into the corner of my room, and started arguing with Marie. I kept shouting, "No, no, no, no," over and over again. My mom rushed in, and even when she came through the door, I didn't look at her. I just kept staring into that corner, yelling at something she couldn't see. After that, it became a nightly thing. I'd wake up, stand in the middle of the room, and shout "no" again and again into the darkness. Eventually, my mom had enough, and we moved house again. For a while, things calmed down. But when I was about 5 or 6, it started in a different way. My older brother and I had this friend who seemed to appear whenever we played together. This time, it was a boy. He'd tell us to do awful things to each other. One day, he kept urging my brother to push me down the stairs. My brother refused, shouting "no" again and again. Then somehow, I ended up falling anyway. Everyone blamed my brother, but he swore it wasn't him. After that, everything got worse for me. I started sleepwalking, talking in my sleep, and having these horrible nightmares that felt more real than dreams should. Nearly every night, I'd walk into my mom's room while I was asleep. She told me I would just stand beside her bed, staring at her with my eyes wide open. What scared her most was my right hand. It was always slightly cupped, like I was holding someone else's hand. The first time she properly noticed it, she woke up and saw me standing there in the dark, just watching her. She said the look on my face didn't feel like me at all. She got up, took me back to bed, and the moment she let go of me, I started screaming and crying. But it didn't stop there. It happened again the next night, and the next. Always the same. Me standing beside her bed, staring, one hand curled like someone invisible was standing there with me. My brother never had any of it. Whatever this was, it seemed focused on me. Eventually, my mom's boyfriend moved in. Before bed, she warned him about what I'd been doing, told him to sleep on the far side because I usually came to her side of the bed. He laughed it off and said she was being dramatic. So he slept in her usual place. He woke up confused, asked what was going on, and immediately turned over. The second he saw me, he screamed. Not just startled, but full-on terrified. My mom said he jumped so hard he nearly kicked me by accident. The second he shouted, I started screaming and crying too. The whole house woke up. My brother, from the other side of the house, was so frightened he wet the bed. And while my stepdad was sitting there trying to catch his breath, I looked at him and said, "You're making Frankie angry." The next morning, my mom sat me down and started asking questions. She wanted to know what Frankie looked like. I told her, as calmly as anything, "He's very big and he's very nice." That answer frightened her more than anything else, because by then she knew he wasn't nice at all. Not long after that, we moved out again, and from the day we left that house, the sleepwalking stopped. The nightmares faded. I never stood by her bed like that again. Even now, looking back, I can't explain any of it, but I still believe whatever kept finding me in those houses was real. And sometimes, I still wonder what my mom saw that first night, standing in the corner of her bedroom with my bottle in her hand. I used to spend part of my summers with my grandmother up in northern Idaho. She ran this wellness retreat out of her home, and as a kid, the place felt huge to me. It was beautiful, almost too beautiful, with tall ceilings, a big open living room, and a guest cottage out front with a sauna and a hot tub for the people staying there. My uncle, who was only about 9 years older than me and the youngest in the family, was living there then too, and that matters later. What I remember most at first wasn't seeing anything strange. It was just the feeling of the place. There was this hallway leading to my grandmother's bedroom suite that always felt wrong. It stayed dark no matter what time it was, and even when the light bulbs were replaced, the light would seem to fade and dull again almost right away. Every time I had to walk down that hall, I'd get this awful knot in my stomach. I'd hurry through it as fast as I could. Her bedroom itself usually felt fine, bright and peaceful even. It was just that hallway. I never wanted to linger there. Then things shifted from feeling eerie to something much harder to explain. My grandmother went through staff constantly, especially housekeepers. Almost no one stayed more than a week or two. And the strange part was, they all seemed to describe the same thing without being told anything beforehand. They'd see a man standing outside near a small pine tree in the yard, just beyond the big front window. The yard was wide open and flat until the tree line, so there was nowhere obvious for someone to hide or disappear. I remember one winter day, there was snow all over the ground, and I saw him too. He was standing there near that little pine, wearing jeans and what looked like a work shirt with a faded denim jacket. I asked the woman cleaning that day who he was. She had only been there a few days, and the second she looked out and saw him, she just went completely still. She stepped outside to check, and he was gone. No footprints in the snow. Nothing. That same woman ended up staying longer than anyone else, maybe around half a year, but even she eventually left. Later, my grandmother showed us photos she'd taken of him. You could clearly make out a person standing by that tree, except he didn't look fully solid. He looked human, but not entirely there. That image has stuck with me ever since. And it wasn't just the staff. Guests at the retreat would often leave early. They'd sign up for several weeks and then quietly check out halfway through. Nobody ever wanted to say too much, but you could tell they were unsettled. My uncle had the worst of it. His bedroom was upstairs on the far side of the house, and he said he heard footsteps on the stairs at night all the time, like someone slowly going up and down when no one else was awake. One night, he found the front door standing wide open, even though he'd been home alone. He wasn't the kind of person who got spooked easily, but that house genuinely rattled him. Whenever he had the chance, he'd stay with friends instead of sleeping there by himself. Years later, after my grandmother was gone, we were sorting through old family photos and boxes of keepsakes. Tucked into one old shoebox were the photos of that man again. That's the part that still gets me. My grandmother had sworn she burned those pictures years before, along with the negatives. She used to say that every time she got rid of them, they somehow turned back up a few years later. You know how sometimes a place gets into your head long before you understand why? Years ago, I was walking through Washington, D.C., and I passed this old building called Tivoli Gardens. It looked worn, quiet, almost as if it were holding its breath. I remember stopping for a second and thinking, one day, I'm going to live there. It was just one of those strange thoughts that comes out of nowhere, and I forgot about it for a long time. Then, nearly 20 years later, my life fell apart a little. I had just gotten out of an 8-year relationship, and our lease was ending, so I had to find somewhere new to live. In the middle of all that stress, that building came back to me so clearly, it was almost unsettling. I couldn't explain it, but I felt pulled toward it. Deep down, I was sure that was where I was supposed to go next. So I went to ask about an apartment, and to my surprise, they actually had openings. The woman at the front desk was incredibly kind. She showed me a few different layouts, and when I told her I wanted something small and quiet since I'd be living alone, she smiled and said she had just the place for me. Not long after that, I was approved. I signed the lease, and my new home was apartment 410 on the 4th floor. At first, I loved it. Truly. It felt like a fresh start, but only for a little while. A few weeks after I moved in, things started happening. Small things at first. Strange dreams that felt too vivid, too detailed, like I wasn't dreaming at all but stepping into someone else's memories. Then one night, around 3 a.m, I got up to use the bathroom, and when I stepped out into the room, I saw him. A boy. He was standing perfectly still in the corner of the apartment, just watching me. He wore old-fashioned clothes, the kind that looked like they belonged in another century. He didn't look angry. He looked sad, deeply sad. His face was blank, but his eyes felt like they were asking for something he didn't know how to say. I froze. Then I ran back to bed, pulled the blanket over my head, and told myself I had to be dreaming. But honestly, I didn't believe that. After that night, the whole apartment changed for me. I always felt like someone was just behind me, barely out of sight. The air felt thick, like it wasn't really air at all. Some days my body would ache for no reason, as if I were carrying around a weight no one else could see. Then one night, I woke up to a voice calling my name. Ferdinand. It was my grandfather's voice. My grandfather had been dead for years, and somehow, half asleep and not even thinking, I answered him. I got up and checked everything. The hallway, the kitchen, the closet. Nothing was there. But the feeling that I wasn't alone was so strong that I couldn't settle down again. Not long after that, I started coming home from work and finding the apartment door unlocked, sometimes slightly open. I know how that sounds, but I was absolutely certain I had locked it before leaving, every single time. I tried more than once to talk to one of the cleaning staff in the building, but every time I brought it up, she'd find a reason to rush off. She never wanted to hear it. Then one day, as I was leaving, I saw the boy again. This time he was out in the hallway. I barely had a second to react before he ran straight toward the wall and disappeared into it, like the wall wasn't solid at all. I ran over there, of course. Nothing. Just silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The very first night, he slept in the large closet area, and the next morning, he looked shaken. Really shaken. He told me he'd had a horrible nightmare that a boy grabbed his arm and wouldn't let him wake up. The fear in his face was real. I could see it. But I still didn't tell him what I'd seen. At some point, I mentioned everything to another woman at the front desk. The minute I started describing it, all the color drained from her face. She told me another couple in the building had shared a story of their own. Similar feelings, similar fear. Except they had seen a little girl instead. By then, the heaviness in that apartment had become part of my daily life. I was exhausted all the time, drained, depressed. I started wondering if I was losing my mind. That's the part that really gets to you, you know? Not just the fear, but the way it makes you question yourself. Eventually, my parents came to visit from Mexico, and I told them everything. Before they left, we prayed together in the apartment. And during that prayer, something came over me. This intense pain rose up in me, but it didn't feel like mine. That's the only way I know how to explain it. It felt borrowed, ancient. I started crying uncontrollably, like a little kid. I couldn't stop. Even now, I still don't fully understand what happened in that moment. After they left, things got worse. My anxiety got sharper. The dreams got stronger. The nights felt almost unbearable. Then a friend offered me a place to stay so we could split rent, and by that point, I was done. Completely done. I said yes. A few days before I moved out, I was standing in the kitchen making dinner when I felt someone pass directly behind me. Not imagined. Not a chill. I mean the full, unmistakable presence of a man. His size, his movement, the shift in the air as he walked past me. I spun around. No one. I opened the hallway door immediately. Nothing there. But the air still felt disturbed, like someone had just crossed the room. When I started getting rid of things before the move, I told the cleaning lady she could stop by if she wanted to take anything. She came, but she wouldn't step inside. She just stood there in the doorway. I told her about the man I had felt in the kitchen and described him as best I could. She went pale. Then she looked at me and asked me to forgive her. She said they had been told not to speak about what happened in that apartment, but since I was finally leaving, she was going to tell me the truth. The man I described, she said, was the young man who had lived there before me. He had diabetes, and he died alone in the apartment while his mother was out of town. They didn't find him for several days. She also told me his mother eventually had to leave because he wouldn't let her sleep, that he kept appearing to her, that she was terrified. And suddenly, everything made sense in the worst possible way. The last 2 nights I spent there, I didn't sleep at all. Before I closed the door to apartment 410 for the final time, I stood there quietly and said a prayer for him. For peace, for rest, for whatever part of him was still trapped there. And even now, almost 5 years later, certain noises still make me jump. And sometimes, late at night, I feel the faintest trace of that same presence, as if apartment 410 hasn't completely forgotten me. I got home one evening and the whole house was empty. Not just quiet, but that deep kind of empty where you can feel it in your chest the second you walk in. No voices, no footsteps, no one in the next room. When I was younger, weird little things used to happen whenever I was alone. Sometimes I'd hear someone softly say my name, like a whisper just out of reach. Other times, during sleep paralysis, I'd hear these faint mechanical noises, almost like gears turning somewhere nearby. I never really had an explanation for any of it, but I remember how unsettling it felt. That night, the second I stepped inside, I had that same feeling again, like I wasn't really by myself. So I did the only thing that made me feel a little safer. I went from room to room and turned on nearly every light in the house. The hallway, the kitchen, the bathrooms, the spare room. I wanted every corner bright, like maybe light itself could keep the fear from settling in. After that, I went into my room, crawled onto the bed, and put on a movie to calm down. I figured if I just stayed distracted long enough, the feeling would pass. At some point, I started drifting. You know that moment when you're trying not to fall asleep, and your head dips for a second before you catch yourself and wake right back up? That's what it felt like. Barely a moment, just a slip. But when I opened my eyes again, something had changed. The house was dark. Not one lamp or ceiling light was still on. Every single light I had switched on was off. For a second, I just sat there staring, trying to make sense of it, because I knew I had left the whole place lit up. I got up and started checking the switches one by one. And that's the part that still gets to me. They weren't just lights that had gone out. Every switch had been flipped down, like someone had walked through the house and turned them all off by hand. The only thing still glowing was the TV, and the movie I'd started, the one I know I'd only watched maybe 10 or 15 minutes of, was over. I've tried to explain it to myself 100 different ways. The most reasonable answer is that I must have sleepwalked and done it myself. But here's what makes it hard to believe. My name's Mara, and I've never sleepwalked before that night. Not once. And as far as I know, it's never happened again. Hello, Paranormal M viewers. We're back again. We love being here and sharing our spiritual experiences with all of you. Thank you for sending in your paranormal stories. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. It's been cold lately, so make sure you get a good night's sleep. Don't forget to wear your headphones and cozy up with a warm blanket. Thank you so much. So this happened right at the end of 6th grade, like last day of school, end of 6th grade. Everyone's buzzing about summer. Backpacks are basically empty, and I'm feeling that light, free kind of happy you only get when you're a kid and break is finally here. I lived super close to the school, maybe 7 minutes walking, so I didn't even think twice about heading home on foot. And because I knew the neighborhood pretty well, I decided to take a shortcut. I'd taken shortcuts before, but that day, I picked a different route. One I'd never actually walked through. At first, it just felt quiet. Not peaceful quiet, more like too quiet. The street kind of tucked off to the side, and everything about it felt abandoned. Some of the houses looked like nobody had been there in ages. Curtains gone, yards messy, that sort of thing. No kids. No dogs. No people. Just this empty, off feeling that kept crawling up my neck. But I told myself I was being dramatic. I was close to home. What could really happen? Then, up ahead, I saw a car parked along the curb, and the driver's door was wide open. That alone made my stomach do this weird little flip. I couldn't tell at first if anyone was inside, and honestly, I didn't want to. I've never liked strangers talking to me, especially adults when I'm alone. So I did what I thought was the smartest thing in the moment. I pulled out my phone and acted like I was busy. You know, the whole, I'm totally on a call thing, hoping it would make me invisible. But as I got closer, I heard a man's voice, calm almost polite, go, "Excuse me. Hey, excuse me." I remember forcing myself to glance over, just for a second. And the second I did, my heart dropped so hard it felt like it hit the ground. There was a man sitting in the driver's seat, and he looked exactly like a teacher I'd had that year, Mr. Kellen. Not my regular teacher, but one who'd been in our class a lot. Same kind of face, same build, even this little gap in his smile that I recognized instantly. It was so similar that for a split second, my brain tried to make it make sense. But then I saw his eyes. They were completely black. Not dark brown, not shadowed, not like, oh, maybe the light is weird. I mean black. No white, no iris, nothing. Just two smooth, pitch-black eyes staring straight at me like that was normal. And the part that messes with me most is, they didn't look like costume contacts. They didn't look fake. They looked natural, like that was how his eyes were supposed to be. That's what made it worse, because it didn't feel like someone trying to scare me. It felt like something that didn't belong. The second our eyes met, I froze. Like my whole body forgot how to work. I didn't answer him. I didn't even breathe right. My chest got tight, my stomach sank, and every instinct I had screamed, "Run." So I did. I turned around and I sprinted, full speed. I don't even remember my feet hitting the sidewalk properly. I just remember the burn in my lungs and the panic pounding in my ears. I didn't look back. Not once. I ran all the way home like something was right behind me. And here's the detail that still makes my skin go cold. Not long before that happened, I'd heard people talking about black-eyed kids and black-eyed people. Like those creepy stories online that you half laugh at, half don't. I didn't totally believe it. I wasn't sitting there thinking it was real. But then that happened, right after I'd learned about it, and it messed with my head in a way I can't really explain. I don't know what I saw. I don't know if it was something supernatural or just something my brain still can't categorize. But I do know it wasn't normal. And I know it wasn't my teacher. It just looked exactly like him. I don't tell many people this, because the second you say, his eyes were completely black, you can almost see them deciding what they think of you. But I swear, hand to my heart, this happened. And I don't think I'll ever forget that street, that car door hanging open, and the way those eyes looked at me like I'd done something wrong just by noticing. Do you ever wake up from a dream and just sit there, staring at the ceiling, because it felt way too real to brush off? Okay, this might sound a little weird, maybe even embarrassing, but I've been carrying it around for days, and I need to say it out loud somewhere. A few nights ago, I had this dream. Nothing flashy. No monsters, no chaos, no dramatic movie stuff. It was just her. And that's the thing. I've never seen her in my life. Not that I can remember anyway. But in the dream, she didn't feel like a stranger. She felt familiar in this quiet, comforting way. Like someone I'd known for years and somehow forgot. Her voice was soft, not whispery, just gentle. And her face. I can't fully picture it now, which honestly makes me even more frustrated. I just remember this calm, almost otherworldly vibe. She had delicate features, maybe Southeast Asian, and this peaceful look like she wasn't trying to impress me. She was just there, like she belonged. But that's not even the part that got into my head. What really messed me up is what happened after I woke up. It was the middle of the night. My heart was pounding, but I wasn't scared. It was more like I'd been pulled out of somewhere I wanted to stay. And I remember thinking, please, I want to see her again. So I closed my eyes again, And I'm not even joking. She came back. Same atmosphere, same feeling, like I'd hit resume instead of starting a new dream. Then I woke up again later. Same thing, wide awake, heart thumping, and this weird certainty in my chest. I went back to sleep, and there she was. Again. 3 times in one night. Like my mind kept finding the exact same place, the exact same person. Like the dream had an address and I kept returning to it. And what's even stranger is, in the second and third dream, I kind of knew what was happening. Not in a, wow, this is amazing way. More like this calm acceptance, like, yeah, I'm back. This is where I'm supposed to be right now. She didn't do anything huge. We didn't save the world. We didn't have some dramatic love story. She just looked at me with this softness, like she understood me without me explaining a thing. I can't even remember the exact words she said, only the feeling she left behind. And now that feeling is the problem, because the details are fading, like they always do. The edges are blurry. The dream is slipping away the more I try to hold on to it. But the emotion didn't fade with it. It's still here, sitting in my chest like a weight I can't name. It honestly feels like she left something in me, like a fingerprint on my soul. I know that sounds dramatic, but I don't know how else to say it. I've had recurring dreams before. I've had dreams that feel intense. But this was different. This felt layered. Like it wasn't just my brain throwing random images at me. It felt like I tapped into something I wasn't supposed to reach. So yeah, here's my slightly ridiculous theory. Don't laugh. What if she's real? Like, what if she's out there somewhere? Not even on Earth, maybe not even in this version of reality, and something glitched for a second. Space, time, whatever you want to call it. And for one night, our dreams lined up like 2 radio signals crossing. Maybe she dreamt about me too. Maybe she woke up with her heart pounding, staring at the ceiling, thinking, who was that? Maybe she tried to go back to sleep, hoping to find me again. And maybe we met in the only place we could meet. Some quiet in-between space, somewhere past logic, somewhere between the stars. I know, it sounds insane. I'm not saying I fully believe it, but I am saying it didn't feel like an ordinary dream, and I don't know what to do with that. Okay, so I don't really know when this started, but it happened enough when I was a kid that it kind of carved itself into my brain. Back then, it was me, my mom and dad, and my little brother Braden living in this 2-story house that always felt a little too quiet at night. Upstairs was basically just our bedrooms and a shared bathroom, with a short hallway connecting everything. Downstairs had the living room and kitchen. Normal stuff. But the weird part of the house was this second staircase. There were 2 ways to get upstairs. The main staircase was right off the living room, the one everybody used without thinking. The other one was tucked way in the back, inside this awkward little room that was mostly storage. Boxes, old blankets, random junk. That staircase always felt like it didn't belong, like it was attached as an afterthought. And honestly, I avoided it. Anyway, the thing that messed with me the most happened one night when I was up late, like really late, playing games in my room. The house was dark, the kind of dark where you can still see the faint glow from the TV downstairs, but everything else feels swallowed up. At some point, I had to get up. I don't even remember if it was to use the bathroom or grab water, just one of those basic half-asleep needs where you're not really thinking. I opened my bedroom door and stepped into the hallway, and that's when I saw him. My dad. He was standing at the bottom of the main staircase, not moving, not calling for me, just standing there and looking up. Now, my dad keeping weird hours wasn't unusual. He worked night shifts a lot. Sometimes he'd leave in the evening and come home early morning. Sometimes his schedule would flip. So seeing him awake late at night wasn't automatically terrifying. But this wasn't normal dad grabbing a snack energy. Something about his face was off. Not angry, not blank exactly either. More like watching. Like he was waiting for me to do something. I remember freezing at the top of the stairs with my hand still on the railing, and the whole house felt like it was holding its breath with me. I don't remember him speaking. I don't remember him saying my name or asking what I was doing. And I don't even know what I said. If I whispered, "Good night," or if I just turned around without a word. All I know is I backed away, went straight back into my room, and shut the door like it could seal me inside reality again. And I stayed in there, lights on, heart racing, trying to convince myself it was nothing. The next morning, I asked him about it, casually, like I was testing the air. "Hey, were you up last night? I saw you downstairs." And my dad just looked at me like I'd asked him if he'd been on the moon. He said, "No, I was asleep. I wasn't downstairs." So I pushed a little. I told him exactly where he was standing, that he was looking right at me. And he swore he had no memory of it. No reason to be down there. And the thing is, my dad has never been a sleepwalker. Not once. He's not the kind of person who wanders around in the night, which is what scared me so badly, because I know what I saw. He wasn't stumbling. He wasn't confused. He was upright, steady, awake-looking. And ever since then, the thought that haunts me is this: what if I had gone downstairs? What if I'd tried to talk to him? What if I'd walked right up to him and said, "Dad, what's going on?" Or grabbed a snack, or opened the fridge, or done anything other than retreat? There were other moments too, less intense but still wrong in a way that sticks to your ribs. Like the times I'd watch Braden go upstairs. Clear as day, I'd see his back, hear his footsteps, hear a door click. And then just a couple minutes later, I'd hear the back door open, and there he was, walking in like he'd been outside the whole time. And sure, he and my dad messed with cars a lot, so him being outside wasn't unusual. But the timing made no sense. It happened enough times that I started asking him, "Didn't you just go upstairs?" And he'd say, "No, I've been outside." So then I'd wonder if I just missed him coming down again. Except I was watching. I was paying attention. I was certain. It felt like the house was producing these little copies, these almost them versions, just long enough to make you doubt your own eyes. The last part of this, the part I hate admitting out loud, is that I wasn't sleeping normally in that house anyway. I had nightmares, constant ones, and I went through periods of sleep paralysis, waking up stuck, terrified, feeling like something was in the room with me. So part of me tries to be logical and say, maybe stress did it. Maybe being overtired did it. Maybe my brain was playing tricks. But then I remember how awake I felt, how clearly I saw my dad standing there, how real it all looked. And the strangest thing? Once I moved out, fully moved out, it stopped. I haven't had anything like that happen in years, and I'm grateful for that. But every once in a while, late at night, when the house is quiet and my brain decides to reopen old doors, I think about that figure at the bottom of the stairs, staring up at me. And I still get this cold, instinctive feeling in my chest, like whatever it was, noticed me noticing it. Hey, I'm new here, but I've been carrying this story around for years, and I think it's finally time I say it out loud. When I was a kid, the only person who ever fully believed me was my grandma Maribel. She's gone now, and even saying that still feels strange. But this memory, it stuck to me, like it never really left. So, This was the summer of 2017. I was almost 11, and back then I used to stay at my grandma's place in Chicago for a couple nights at a time during the week. Nothing fancy, just a small, cozy house. 2 bedrooms, a little bathroom, the kind of place that felt familiar the second you stepped inside. My grandma had this way of saying things casually that should have sounded scary, but somehow didn't, until later. She'd always tell me, "Mija, this house is haunted," like she was talking about the weather. And I mean, little things happened. Stuff shifting when no one touched it. A soft thump in another room. A cabinet that wasn't open before. Not big enough to prove anything, but not small enough to ignore either. That week, my sister didn't want to come with me. She said she didn't feel like it, but I remember the way she avoided eye contact when she said it. So it was just me and Grandma Maribel. When we got to the house that day, we walked in and something immediately felt off. My grandma always kept certain doors shut. Bathroom, coat closet, things like that. Her cat Miko had free roam of the living room, kitchen, and the bedrooms, so those doors might be open sometimes. But the bathroom, the coat closet, those were usually closed. Except when we came in, both were open. My grandma stopped in the doorway and just stared for a second. I remember her face tightening, like she was trying to convince herself it was nothing. She said, "I know I shut those." Then she did that thing adults do where they try to smooth it over with logic. Maybe she forgot. Maybe she was distracted. But I could tell she didn't believe her own explanation. Later, she told me she'd run me a bath before bed. I was sitting nearby, half watching TV, half listening to the water fill the tub. The sound was steady, normal. And then, it stopped. Not like the water pressure slowed down. Not like someone bumped a knob. It just cut off, like a hand turned it off on purpose. And the handle on that faucet wasn't loose or easy to move. It took effort. Even my grandma made a face when she checked it. She didn't panic. She wasn't that kind of person. But she got quiet. And when Grandma Maribel got quiet, that's when I knew she was actually scared. That night, I fell asleep in the guest room, and everything was fine for a while. Then I woke up because I heard something, like a door shifting or a cabinet tapping shut. At first, I thought it was my grandma getting up to get the cat some water or something. But when I looked over, Miko was already awake. He was sitting perfectly still, staring toward the kitchen like he was locked onto something. Not blinking, not moving, just watching. I whispered his name and patted the bed, trying to get him to come to me. He didn't. And that's when my stomach started doing that slow sinking thing, like my body already knew what my brain didn't want to admit. So I got up. I walked out into the hallway, and the house felt colder than it should have. Not freezing, just drained, like the air had been pulled thin. The kitchen had a window that let in a little light from outside, and that faint glow was enough to show me that something was wrong. Cabinet doors were open. Stuff was on the floor. Plastic containers, little things from the counter like they'd been brushed down in a hurry. And my backpack, the one I'd left on a chair by the table, and then I saw it. In that dim window light, there was a figure in the kitchen. Not like a shadow from the streetlight, not like a trick of the dark. This was darker than the dark around it, like the absence of light, shaped into a person. It was tall, too tall. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My throat just locked up like my body refused to make noise. And then my grandma was there, right behind me. I felt her hand touch my shoulder, steady but tense, and I heard her inhale sharply. Like she'd seen it too, and she was trying not to make it worse. For a moment, we were both just frozen, staring. And then, this is the part that messes with me the most. It didn't run. It didn't lunge. It didn't do anything dramatic. It just faded. Not like it walked away. Not like it turned a corner. More like it stopped being there. like someone lowered the brightness on it until it disappeared into nothing. But Grandma Maribel and I looked at each other right after, and we didn't even have to speak. We both knew. We both saw it. After that, I honestly don't remember every detail. My memory gets blurry like it's protecting me. I know my grandma brought me back into the bedroom. I know she kept the lights on. I know I didn't sleep much after that. Nothing else happened that night, but in the morning, the house felt different, like it was pretending to be normal again, like it had gotten what it wanted and didn't need to show itself anymore. We didn't talk about it much, but we didn't have to. My grandma would just give me this look sometimes, soft, serious, and I knew she was thinking about it too. And here's the part that still makes my skin prickle. A couple years later, after my grandma moved out, I heard that some kind of paranormal TV crew did an investigation at that house. I don't remember the show name, but I remember hearing they found a lot, enough that people were talking about it. And even stranger than that, the neighborhood had this story about the alley behind the house. The backyard wasn't really a backyard, just a strip of grass, and then the alley right there. Apparently, at some point, they found a body down in the sewer access nearby. A really tall guy. And I hate even saying this, because it sounds like I'm trying to tie things together like a movie. But the figure we saw? It was about that height. And I don't know what that means. I don't know if it means anything at all. I just know what I saw. And I know the one person who believed me, my Grandma Maribel, saw it too. So, we've had little things happen in our house for a while. Stuff that's easy to shrug off at first. Like a door will suddenly slam somewhere down the hall when no one's near it. Or my partner's phone will just slide off a table like someone flicked it. One time it fell off the same end table 3 times in one day, and we kept checking if the surface was uneven or if one of the cats bumped it. But we never saw anything happen. We'd just hear the smack and look at each other like, okay, what was that? Then I came back from a weekend away. Nothing dramatic, just a little trip. And that first night home, my partner and I had this really heavy conversation about our future. The kind of talk that leaves the air feeling thick afterward, even when you're trying to act normal. And I remember thinking, later on, that maybe all that stress cracked something open. Like we invited in something ugly without meaning to. A couple nights after that, we're on the couch around 10 p.m., watching some show, half paying attention. And both of our cats are sitting perfectly still, staring up at the ceiling. Not just staring, tracking something. Their heads moved slowly in the exact same direction, like their eyes were following a point drifting across the room overhead. My stomach dropped immediately because it didn't look like cats being weird. It looked like they were watching someone walk. My partner, his name is Darren, by the way, got up and tried to distract them. Snacks, toys, calling their names. Nothing. They wouldn't even blink. Just locked on the ceiling like they were under a spell. And I said it without even thinking. Babe, there's something in here with us. The second I said it, the whole vibe changed. Like the room got quieter, but heavier at the same time. After that, things got weird in a way I can't really explain without you feeling it in your bones. I started getting sleep paralysis. And I know what people say about sleep paralysis. Your brain half dreaming, body frozen, hallucinations, all that. I get it. But this felt personal. It would happen in the middle of the night and I'd be stuck, awake but not able to move. And I'd see this dark shape coming from behind the bathroom door. Not like a clear person, more like a shadow that had weight to it. It would drift toward me, and then it would sit on my chest like it was pinning me down. I would try to scream, but nothing came out. Not even a whisper. And I remember telling myself very clearly, don't open your eyes. Don't open your eyes or you'll see what's sitting on you. So I kept my eyes shut and just repeated, in my head, over and over, "Jesus, help me." 3 times, like I was counting, clinging to it. And then, suddenly, like someone snapped their fingers, it was over. I could move. I opened my eyes. The room was normal. Darren was asleep in the other room. Silence, like nothing had happened. A couple nights later, Darren told me he woke up in the guest room freezing cold, like the air dropped 10 degrees in seconds. He thought a window was open, or someone was in the house. He actually got up ready to fight, like adrenaline pumping, checking corners. Nothing. All the windows locked. No one inside. No explanation. The next morning he told me, and I tried to stay calm. I was like, "Okay," and shrugged it off because what else do you do? But then, maybe 10 minutes later, he leaves to drop our daughter off at daycare, and I'm getting ready. I'm blow-drying my hair in the hallway and the smoke alarm above me goes, beep, 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 3 times. Clean, spaced out. Not a battery chirp, not a test. Just 3 beeps. It had never done that before. We couldn't. Not once. No matter what we did, it wouldn't do 3 consecutive beeps like that again. Then there was the piggy bank. My daughter has this little piggy bank on a bookshelf that plays music when you press a button. One morning, I'm waking her up, telling her to get dressed, and from across the room it starts playing. Cheerful little tune, totally out of nowhere. To play it, you have to press the button. It doesn't just go off by itself. And that wasn't the last time it happened. One day we came back from visiting family, bags in hand, routine stuff. And I said to Darren, "I'm going upstairs to tidy the bedrooms." The second I hit the top of the stairs, it felt heavy, like the air had turned into wet fabric. I felt it in our bedroom a little, but I ignored it because I was trying not to feed my own fear. But when I walked into my daughter's room across the hall, it was like walking into a weighted blanket. This pressure, not pain, just this thick presence that made my skin prickle. I knew something was in there. Still, I kept cleaning because I didn't want to freak myself out. I turned to make her bed, smoothing the sheets, and the piggy bank started playing again. Right then, my heart just sank. Like, "Oh, you're here." After that, it wasn't just noises. It was things you could see. Over the next several weeks, it was like the house started showing off. One afternoon, I caught someone in my peripheral vision near the front door, tall, wearing a tan work jacket and jeans. I couldn't see his face, just the shape and the clothes. I honestly thought it was Darren, and I was about to say, "How did you get upstairs so fast?" And then I heard Darren's voice, clearly, in the basement, laughing and playing with our daughter. I turned back to the doorway. No one was there. Another day I was hanging a shirt in my closet, and a stack of papers on a shelf just moved, not slid. They lifted and shifted like they were whisked off by a hand. I froze, staring, trying to logic it out. Like maybe the shirt brushed them? There was no way. The distance didn't make sense. And then, right after that, a stuffed animal sitting beside the papers was pushed, slowly, off the same shelf. Slow, like a deliberate shove. My daughter saw it too. She looked up and said, really quietly, "Mommy, that was weird." There was also this moment in the car where her window went down by itself. The child lock was on, and yes, electronics can glitch, I know. But it happened at such a perfectly timed moment that it felt like a response. And then the scariest physical feeling I've ever had. I was home alone in the powder room, brushing my teeth with the door open, and on my left arm it felt like someone touched me. Except it wasn't a gentle touch. It was sharp, electric, like a hard poke that shot shivers down my entire left arm and into my side, only on that side. It happened 3 times in a row. Zap, stop. Zap, stop. Zap. I remember spitting toothpaste, shaking and saying out loud, "You need to leave. You're not welcome here." And then I ran out of the house. Like actually ran, barefoot, heart pounding, not even thinking, just trying to get away from whatever was standing that close to me. The thing is, after a while I stopped being scared and started being angry, because it felt like I could sense it before things happened. Like the air would change and I'd think, here we go. My anxiety was through the roof. I felt like I was being bullied in my own home. Eventually, we called a priest to bless the house. And I'll be honest, everyone has opinions about that. Some people swear it works. Some people say it makes things worse. But after the blessing, the house went quiet for about 2 months, and I actually started to breathe again. I slept better. I stopped jumping at every sound. But lately, little things have started again. A couple hangers shifted in the closet when no one touched them. A paper bag that was tucked securely on a shelf slid off and hit the floor, even though I had just been rearranging nearby things, and it still didn't make sense how it moved the way it did. And then there's this sound. Sometimes, late at night, I'll hear this faint growling. Quiet, like a dog warning you under its breath. Only problem is, we don't have a dog. So yeah, that's where we're at. And I know how it sounds. I do. I'm not someone who wants to believe in this stuff. But once you live inside it, once you feel the air change, once you watch your kid see something move with her own eyes, you stop arguing with yourself. You just get alert. Because the worst part isn't even the slamming doors or the objects moving. It's the feeling that whatever it is, it's listening. And sometimes, it answers back. So, let me tell you about this place we used to live in. We've moved out now, but I swear that house had a presence. The kind where everyone in the family had at least one weird, can't-explain-it moment. It sat on this remote piece of land, halfway up a mountain, surrounded by trees like the forest was trying to keep it to itself. Beautiful during the day. At night, different story. One evening I was home alone, and you know how your brain gets when you're by yourself in a place like that. Quiet, isolated, no neighbors close enough to hear you yell. I did what I always did when I wanted to feel safe. I locked up everything. I went to bed with the TV turned up louder than I normally would, like the noise could build a little wall around me. Our bedroom was at the end of the hallway, and there was another door on the opposite end, down past the living room. I remember thinking, okay, if anything opens that far door, I'll hear it, and if I need to, I can get out through the bedroom door that leads outside. Just precautions. Normal stuff when you're basically living on the edge of the woods. I'm right on the edge of sleep when I hear it. Bang! Not a tiny noise. Not a house-settling noise. A hard, ugly bang. Like someone slammed a fist into a wall. And then another. And then it starts to sound like it's moving. Like the banging is traveling down the hallway toward me, bumping the walls as it comes. It wasn't steady like footsteps. It was chaotic. Like something was crashing into things as it got closer. My first thought was actually kind of casual. Maybe my son Mason came by to grab something before heading out. He'd done that before. Quick stop, in and out, no big deal. So I didn't panic yet. There's a pause, just the TV noise filling the room. And then the banging starts again. Closer this time. I reach over and mute the TV. And I call out, "Mason?" Nothing. I call again, louder. "Mason, is that you?" Still nothing. And then, silence. Total silence. The kind of silence that feels like the whole house is holding its breath. I'm lying there staring at the dark hallway, and I remember thinking, if I hear one more thump, I'm leaving. I don't care how ridiculous I look. And like it heard me think it. like it was waiting for that exact sentence. Boom, 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 boom. Right on my bedroom door. Not tapping, not rattling. Full-on pounding. Fast and violent. Like someone was furious and wanted in now. I swear my soul left my body. Flew out of my hand, like I tossed it. I ran straight out the bedroom door that leads outside without even thinking. And of course, because life loves timing, it was one of those brutal Canadian nights where the air hurts your face. Something like minus 20-ish. The kind of cold that bites through pajamas instantly. I sprint past the living room window and glance down the hallway as I'm moving, because part of me is still trying to prove there's a logical explanation. That far door I'd closed at the start of the hall? Still shut. Still closed. Still exactly how I left it. So now I'm outside in thin pajamas, barefoot or close to it, shaking so hard I can barely breathe. And I'm thinking, okay, what do I do now? The only thing that made sense in that moment was the car parked out front. My son's girlfriend's little two-door. I run to it, yank the handle, and thank everything it's unlocked. I climb in and shut the door as quietly as I can, like quiet matters when you're terrified. I start rummaging around and find a bag of clothes she'd been meaning to donate. Hoodies, a sweater, random stuff. I pull it all over myself like a blanket, layering anything I can just to stop shaking. And I realize my phone isn't with me. It's back inside. Of course it is. So I'm just sitting there, cold, listening, adrenaline pounding in my ears. And then the car does something that still makes my stomach drop when I think about it. Both door locks, the little knobs on the driver and passenger side, start going crazy. They're locking and unlocking at the same time, rapidly. Like click, 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 click. So fast it didn't even seem possible. Both sides, together, over and over like something was playing with them. I just stared, looking back and forth between the two locks, waiting for it to stop, because surely it would stop. It didn't. It went on for maybe 15 seconds, but it felt longer. It felt like the car was alive and panicking with me, or something else was inside the moment with me, showing me it could reach me out there too. I couldn't take it. I threw the door open and got out, and I didn't even run back toward the house. I ran down the driveway and stood under a tree, half hidden, just shaking and trying to figure out what was real. I stayed there until my husband pulled in. Thank God it was within 20 minutes or so, because I don't know what I would have done if it was longer. When we checked afterward, Mason hadn't been there at all. He was nowhere near the house that night. And here's the detail that really messes with me. That car wasn't even supposed to be capable of doing that. Her remote door opener had never worked properly since she bought it. She always had to unlock the doors manually. No fancy fob tricks. No random electrical quirks like that, ever. So I can't tell you what it was. I can't give you a neat ending where I go, oh, it was just the wind, or turns out a raccoon got in the hallway, because, no, that wasn't a raccoon pounding on my bedroom door like it wanted to break it down. All I know is that I still think about it, more often than I want to admit, and I'm really, really glad we don't live on that mountain anymore. I'm still kind of 50-50 on ghosts and the whole paranormal thing. Like, I want to be the logical person. I want to roll my eyes and say, there's always an explanation. But I've had a couple moments I can't neatly file away, and there's one in particular that, honestly, still makes my stomach drop when I think about it. So I grew up in Utah, around Salt Lake. If you've ever been there, you know how it is. LDS churches everywhere. One on every other corner, it feels like. A lot of my friends were Mormon, even though my family wasn't. My best friend growing up, his name was Braden, lived right next door, and we did everything together. So when he'd go to this youth thing the church did, I'd tag along sometimes. It was basically like scouts. A couple nights a week, different adults teaching you random stuff, little activities, that kind of thing. I was around 10, maybe 11. One evening they had this bigger get-together at the church, like a whole family thing. Barbecue, people outside, kids running around, games, laughter, all of it. Most of the action was on one side of the building and outside, where it was bright and busy. But the other half of the church? Nobody was using it. The lights were off. It was just dark, quiet, like the building ended and turned into a shadow. At some point, I had to use the bathroom, and the bathroom line where everyone was hanging out was ridiculous. So I remember thinking, whatever, I'll just go to the other side. No big deal. It was starting to get dusky outside, and that made the dark side of the church feel even darker. Still, there was enough light coming in from the glass doors near the bathrooms that I could see where I was going. I go into the bathroom, and while I'm in there, I was sitting on the toilet, I get this weird, crawling, itchy feeling. Like my body was trying to warn me without using words. Just this heavy sense of something is not right in here. But I've always been an anxious kid. So I'm like, relax, you're being dramatic. I finish up, wash my hands, and step back out. Right outside the bathroom, there's a drinking fountain. I remember bending down to take a drink, and the second I did, it hit me like a wave. This sudden, overwhelming terror. Not spooked, not creepy, not uneasy. Terror. Like the air changed, like something behind me should not be there. I straighten up fast and turn around, and there's this hallway behind me, pitch black, stretching back into the building. And standing in that darkness is a kid. A little boy, younger than me. He's pale. Not like doesn't get sun pale, like paper pale. And he has these cuts on him. Little marks, like scratches across his face and arms. His clothes look dirty and worn, like he'd been outside for days. Tattered. Wrong for a church barbecue where everyone's dressed normal and clean. And the thing that messes with me the most is how clearly I remember his face. Like it got stamped into my brain. He just starts walking toward me. And he's not crying. He's not scared. He's almost, this is going to sound insane, amused. Like he's trying not to laugh. He gets closer and I hear this little giggle. Soft, almost playful. My first instinct, because I was a kid and I didn't know what else to do, was to go, "Hey, are you okay?" He looks right at me and giggles again. The empty side, the quiet parking lot. And I remember just standing there, frozen, like my body forgot how to work. I couldn't move, couldn't think, just this buzzing fear in my ears. And then I snapped out of it and ran. I ran back toward the party like my life depended on it. When I got back, I didn't even tell anyone. I didn't want to make a scene, and I also didn't want people laughing at me. But I was scanning faces, looking around like crazy, trying to find that kid. I checked around the groups, the food tables, the games, everywhere. He wasn't there. I never saw him again. I was shaken the rest of the night. I tried to act normal, but I felt like something had reached inside me and flipped a switch. And when I went home, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him in that hallway. What makes it worse is, I still don't really talk about it. Because if someone told me that story, I'd probably think they were exaggerating, or making it up, or misremembering. And I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I'm not saying it was a ghost. I'm not saying it wasn't. I'm just saying, I don't know what that was. And even now, years later, when I picture that dark hallway and that pale kid smiling like he knew something I didn't, I get that same cold feeling in my chest, like my body remembers before my brain can explain it. So, I don't tell this story much. Not because I'm trying to be mysterious about it, more because it's the kind of thing that makes people go quiet and look at you differently. But you asked for it like you actually wanted to hear it, so here we go. Back in the early 2000s, my parents got this idea that city life was slowly grinding them down. You know the feeling. Noise, traffic, neighbors you never talk to. So they did something bold and moved us out to this tiny village in rural Yorkshire. And the house they picked wasn't just old. It was the kind of old that holds on to you. It had been built sometime in the 1800s and, this is important, it used to be a vicarage, church-owned. The vicar lived there, and apparently there were servants on the property too. Later on, after it stopped being tied to the church, it became some sort of residential home for kids who weren't doing well. Troubled, unstable, whatever label people used at the time. Then, eventually, it ended up with us. I was about 9, maybe just turned 10 when we moved in. My older brother Callum was away most of the time, and my sister Amelie was abroad for work. So at first it was just me and Mum and Dad in this massive, echoing house. Because I was the youngest, and there were all these empty rooms, my parents told me I could choose any bedroom I wanted. I still remember walking up that long staircase, the kind where the steps creak even when you're trying not to breathe. I went from room to room, peeking in, thinking I'd get a "this is the one" moment. And then I opened a door in the top corner of the house. 2 windows, wooden floorboards, sunlight actually pouring in. It felt warm. Not just temperature warm, like the room had been waiting for someone to come back. There was even this faint, sweet smell in the air, like vanilla or old sponge cake. So I picked that room, because it felt safe. That first night, I'm lying in bed trying to fall asleep, and I hear crying. At first it's muffled, like it's coming through walls, and I tell myself it's the TV downstairs. My parents were still awake. Easy explanation. So I squeeze my eyes shut and try to ignore it. But it gets louder, and then it becomes clear. It isn't a TV. It's a girl's voice. Very close, but also not. She's saying, "Help me. Please, help me." And the way she said it, God, I can still hear it. She wasn't just upset. She sounded desperate, like she'd been trying for a long time and no one had listened. I sat up so fast I felt sick. I opened my bedroom door and stepped onto the landing, and it sounded like it was coming from further down the upstairs corridor, around the bend toward the back part of the house. And I didn't investigate. I didn't do the brave movie thing. I bolted. I flew down those stairs so fast I swear I barely touched them, burst into the living room, and I'm crying so hard I can't even get words out properly. Just panicked noise. My parents calmed me down, wrapped me in blankets, gave me that look parents give when they're trying not to show worry. And when I finally explained, they did what parents do. They tried to make it smaller. It's a new house. It's old. You're overtired. Your imagination's running wild. And I wanted to believe them. I did believe them. Because I never heard it again. Not for months. One night, we're all at the table talking about the house, just joking around. And Amelie looks at Mum and goes, "Can I tell him?" Mum hesitates, then nods once, like she'd been holding it in too. Amelie turns to me and says, "The first night I slept here, I heard a little girl screaming for help." I swear my stomach dropped so hard it felt like I was falling. She said it sounded like it was right outside her door, and when she opened it, the sound didn't stop. It shifted. like it was down the corridor, then behind her, then to the side, like it couldn't decide where to be. That was the moment it stopped being my imagination. Later, we found out that part of the house, where her room was, had burned in the 1800s and been rebuilt. We never found official records of anyone dying, but that section had apparently been servant quarters back in the vicarage days. And ever since then, I've always wondered if someone got trapped and never made it out. Or if they did. But whatever fear they felt got soaked into the walls. And that wasn't even the only thing. One morning, broad daylight, like 10ish, I'd gone upstairs after breakfast to play my old console. As I passed my parents' bedroom, I glanced in and saw a man standing at the end of their bed. Long black coat, tall, top hat, just standing there like he belonged. I froze, took one step back, blinked, and he was gone. No footsteps, no door moving, nothing. Right next to my room was this tiny toilet with a heavy wooden door, and there was this big old keyhole in it. We didn't have the key. Never did. It had probably been lost for decades. One night before bed, I went to use it, and the door wouldn't open. Handle wouldn't budge. I tried forcing it with my shoulder. And then I heard a sound from the other side. A deep, low growl. Not a person. Not the house settling. It sounded like a dog, close enough that it made the hair on my arms stand up. I ran downstairs again, absolutely shaking. Dad came back up with me, grabbed the handle, and the door swung open like it had never been stuck at all. Empty, quiet, normal. But after that, I started seeing things. Not full shapes, not details, more like a shadow. A four-legged shadow that would dart into my room like a dog running, cut across the floor, and then vanish into the wall. No sound, just a quick movement that made your eyes chase it without meaning to. Months later, Dad was doing work out front, digging a spot for a big stone ornament Mom had bought. And he found bones. A lot of small bones, and 2 skulls. Dogs. After that, the shadow stopped, completely, like it had been waiting for someone to find them. Above my room was the attic, 2 spaces, and these narrow little storage tunnels along the edges of the roof. One of the attic rooms still had an old writing desk in it, the kind with worn corners like someone had leaned on it for years. There was even a little safe built into it that we never managed to open. At night, I'd hear something being dragged across the attic floorboards above me. Heavy, scraping. Sometimes it sounded like chain or metal, or like someone pulling something awkward over and over. It happened multiple times a week. And you know what's weird? You don't get used to that. Not really. You just learn how to lie still and pretend you're asleep, like that will keep the sound from noticing you. Then, this is the part that still makes my skin prickle. The year before we moved out, my stereo started turning itself on. 7 days in a row, and not music, not a station, just loud, full-volume white noise, like static that fills your whole chest. The first night, I thought my brother was messing with me, but then it happened while we were all downstairs eating dinner together. No one was upstairs. No one could have touched it. On the 7th day, Sunday, it turned on like normal, blared static. And then it never happened again. Not once. And remember that sweet smell in my room? The one I noticed the first day? We eventually found out that when the place was a care home, there'd been a young lad staying in what became my bedroom. Someone who used to work there told a family friend that he'd walk to the bakery and buy sweet cakes, then hide them in his wardrobe or even under loose boards. I went looking, obviously, lifted what I could, checked everywhere I was brave enough to check. Never found a thing. But that room always smelled like something warm and sugary, like a treat you weren't supposed to have. Now, other parts of the house had their own habits. The formal dining room, for example, we only used it for special occasions. Christmas, birthdays, New Year. One year, my aunt and uncle came to stay. Late at night, my aunt woke up and heard music downstairs. She assumed Mom had had too much wine, honestly, fair assumption, and left something on. So she went down, followed the sound into the dining room, and saw the stereo sitting at the far end of the table. Music was playing loudly, but the display wasn't lit. She walked closer to unplug it, and realized it wasn't plugged in at all. She said the second she turned away, the dining room door slammed behind her so hard the glass rattled. She didn't investigate. She didn't shout. She just walked upstairs, got into bed, and pretended nothing happened. The creepiest part? Amelie admitted later the same thing happened to her about a month earlier. She and Mom just never told anyone. Outside, the driveway had this long archway of trees running down one side. In the old days, horse and cart would have come through there toward the stables out back. During the day, it looked pretty. At night, it felt like a tunnel you shouldn't enter alone. We used to joke about it, tell visitors to walk down the drive by themselves just to see their face when they came back. Every single person said the same thing. It felt like someone was watching me from the right side of the house. Then one night, Mom and Amelie came back from shopping and parked by the kitchen entrance along the side of the house. They opened the boot and something sprinted across the front of the car into the trees. Fast, low, wrong. They screamed so loud I heard it upstairs through my headphones. Dad ran out, and they couldn't even explain what they saw properly. Just that it wasn't human. Or at least, it didn't move like one. After that, we started going to the shops together. Not because anyone said it out loud, just because everyone understood. The kitchen, though, that was where we lived. Tea, chats, family dinners, late-night talking. It should have felt normal. One night, it was just me and Amelie at the table after dinner. Parents were in the living room, house quiet. And we watched a kitchen drawer slide open by itself. Slowly, like it was being pulled. Then things started hopping out. A pen flipped onto the counter, then another, a couple of batteries, a little ball of rubber bands. It was so absurd it almost felt polite, like the house was showing off. Right. Okay then. Stuff like that became normal. Glasses sliding slightly, salt and pepper knocked over when no one was near them. Little movements at the edge of ordinary life. And then there was the basement door off the kitchen corridor. Just a thin little basement section, because the real cellar, this huge space that used to run under the whole house, had been sealed up with concrete years before. We always wondered why. Structural reasons? Safety? Something else? But the biggest clue was the dogs. We had big dogs, proper confident ones, and they refused to go near that basement door. Dad would call them up, laughing, trying to coax them closer. The moment he touched the handle and opened the door, every single one of them would scatter like they'd been threatened. And it wasn't just one dog spooking the others. They all reacted at once, like instinct, like survival. Dad used to show it to guests like a party trick. Open the door, watch the dogs bolt, then dare someone to go down there and sit in the dark with the door closed. Most people lasted 2 minutes. Some didn't make it halfway down the steps. And yeah, there's more. There's always more with that house. But that's the thing. It wasn't like one big dramatic moment. It was years of small, strange things, just enough to make you feel like the house remembered lives that weren't yours. And sometimes, it wanted you to remember them too. So, I've always had this soft spot for the paranormal. Not in a I believe everything I hear way, more like I'm open to it, but I'm also the kind of person who needs to feel it in my bones before I'll call it real. And this was one of those moments. Real for me, and real for my sister. My sister Raina. It was a totally normal evening. We'd just finished making dinner. Nothing fancy, just our go-to vegetarian comfort food. This time, it was loaded veggie nachos, roasted peppers, black beans, a little salsa situation happening. You know, the kind of meal that makes you feel like you actually did something with your day. I got my plate together first and wandered into the next room to eat. Raina was still in the kitchen, clattering around, probably adding just one more topping, like she always does. And here's the part that still makes me pause whenever I think about it. While I was chewing, not talking, not even looking at anything in particular, I had this random song stuck in my head. Not the whole song, just one tiny line, like a little musical hiccup. I wasn't humming, I wasn't mouthing it. It was only in my thoughts, like background noise in my own brain while I ate. A minute later, maybe less, I hear Raina, from a completely different room, suddenly sing out loud the exact same line. Same little fragment, same wording, same rhythm. Like she'd picked it up mid-thought. There was no TV on, no music, no phone playing in the background. We weren't even talking to each other at that moment. Just two people in two rooms doing two different things. When she came in, I just stared at her for a second and went, "Okay, why did you just sing that?" And she looked at me like I was the weird one, like I'd asked her why the sky is blue. She goes, "Because you were singing it a minute ago when you started eating." And I said, "No, I wasn't." She squinted at me. "Yes, you were." And I had to tell her, slowly because I could see her getting uneasy, "Raina, I was singing it, but only in my head. I didn't say a single word out loud." The way her face changed was immediate. She didn't laugh. She didn't brush it off. She just went quiet, like her brain was trying to grab onto the nearest logical explanation and coming up empty. And what made it even stranger is, this wasn't the first time something like that had happened between us. Little moments where one of us thinks something and the other answers, without being told. Or one of us gets a sudden urge to say a specific phrase, and the other one swears they were just thinking it. I've tried to explain it away 100 ways. Like maybe we just know each other so well that we're bound to overlap sometimes. Same upbringing, same humor, same patterns. So maybe our brains just predict each other. But then there's the part I can't ignore. Our mom has noticed it too. She once said that when we were younger, she watched us have what looked like a full-on conversation without speaking. Like we were communicating in glances and pauses and somehow understanding each other anyway. At the time, I figured she was exaggerating. But now, I'm not so sure. Because it still happens. Not constantly, but enough that it's hard to call it coincidence every time. And the weirdest detail is this. It never happens when I try. If I sit there and focus and think, "Okay, Raina, I'm sending you a word. Table. Table. Hear me say table." Nothing. She'll look at me like I'm zoning out. So I don't know what the right explanation is. I just know what it felt like in that moment. Like my thought didn't stay entirely inside me. And ever since then, I've been left with this quiet question I can't shake. How many times have we been hearing each other without realizing it? So, I need to tell you about something that still makes my stomach tighten when I think about it. A while back, I was sleeping out in this little outbuilding. Technically, it's a shed, but my dad fixed it up into a cozy guest space. It sits right beside our house, close enough that it should feel safe. But that night, it didn't. I had this dream that felt way too real. In it, I was taking care of someone who was really sick. like end of life sick. I was trying to help them, trying to be gentle, trying to do everything right, like you do when you're terrified of losing someone and you can't stop it. And then they died, and right after that, something came out of their mouth. Not like a normal thing, not like blood or breath or anything that makes sense. It was like a presence with weight, like it had been waiting behind their teeth the whole time. I can't even explain it without sounding ridiculous, but the moment it appeared, I knew it wasn't just part of the dream. It looked almost human, but wrong in a way that made my brain reject it. And I remember locking my eyes on where its eyes should have been, like there were sockets, but the darkness inside them didn't behave like darkness. It felt like looking into a deep well and realizing the well is looking back. And I started to panic, but it wasn't just fear. It was like it grabbed something inside me. All these old memories, every shame, every hard moment, every trauma I've tried to bury, came rushing up at once. Like my whole past snapped open and poured through me. I felt myself falling. Not falling like you fall off something, falling like sinking into endless pits, one after another, deeper and deeper, and the dark was alive. I had this horrible, personal feeling that it wanted me specifically, like it could sense the soft spots in me, like it knew exactly where I've been weak before. And I'm not saying that lightly. I've had my own history with mental health, with those thoughts you don't always tell people about. In the dream, it felt like it recognized that part of me the way a predator recognizes a limp. Then, snap, I wake up, and I'm choking, like actually choking. My eyes are rolling back, my throat is tight, my body is fighting for air. It's not like waking up from a nightmare sweating. It was physical, violent, terrifying. That has never happened to me before. I finally get control again, and I'm sitting up in that little guest shed, and the first thought I have is, it's not over. That's the part that messes with me the most, because even though I was awake, the atmosphere didn't change. The fear didn't fade. It felt like I'd just opened my eyes inside the same danger. I had this overwhelming sense of being watched, like the air had attention, like I was exposed. And the woods behind our house, I couldn't stop staring at them. It felt like if I looked away, something would cross the distance between the tree line and me. I don't even know what I thought I'd see, but the terror was so complete it made my hands shake. So I bolted. I just got out of there and ran straight to the main house. And the second I stepped inside, it was like crossing an invisible line. The pressure dropped. My body unclenched. The feeling of danger stopped. Not completely, because I still kept checking the windows, but the house felt like shelter. Like whatever was out there didn't have the same reach in here. And my cat, sweet little guardian that he is, he could tell. He came right to me, pressed up against me, stayed close like he was trying to anchor me to something normal. It sounds small, but in that moment, it mattered. It was like he was saying, "You're here. You're not alone." Instead, they got quiet. And then they told me. They'd seen it too. Not the exact same scene, but the same thing. Over the years, every few months off and on, they'd had dreams where something showed up at the foot of the bed. My mom even admitted there was a time she woke up begging it to go away. My dad said he'd seen it standing there too, just watching. And then my dad tells me, like it's a fact you mention when you're talking about home repairs, that he had someone come in and do some kind of cleansing or banishing for the bottom floor of the house years ago, because he'd felt something was wrong ever since we moved in. And suddenly, all these little feelings I dismissed snapped into place. Because ever since I went away to school, every time I came home, I'd feel this heavy dread around the pond near our property. Like a radius. Like crossing into a zone where my chest would tighten for no reason. I used to tell myself I was just stressed or annoyed or, honestly, I used to think maybe I was just unhappy to be home. But after that night, I couldn't pretend it was just mood anymore. What's eerie is how consistent the details are across all of us. We all describe it as human-shaped, but not quite. Sometimes unnaturally tall, sometimes too small. Always gaunt, sickly looking, like a face stretched thin over something starving. And the one thing we all agree on? Its face is wrong in a way you don't want to remember. My mom insists it was veiled in her dreams. My dad swears it has some connection to the Chariot tarot card. He's not even sure why, but he feels it like a symbol that keeps showing up in the same mental place. And then there are the other weird things that might be related, or might just be this area being what it is. Like the shed itself. When we renovated it, a light literally exploded over my sister. And inside those walls, there were nails. So many nails. Like someone had hammered thousands of them into the wood for no reason at all. We joked it was some previous owner pretending to be busy, hiding out, making noise. But still, it's strange. And I've heard footsteps up in the loft before. Heavy, slow, like boots. That one doesn't feel the same as the dream thing, though. It feels separate, like a different kind of presence. There's also my friend who lives across the same pond. When she was a kid, she used to see what looked like a child standing at the foot of her bed, staring at her. She even found dolls up in the attic. Her story doesn't match mine perfectly, but it's close enough geographically to make you wonder. And one time, out in the woods with a metal detector, I found old nails, 1800s old, the kind that make you think of coffins. The way they were laid out near this big tree gave me a weird thought, but honestly, that spot didn't feel sinister. If anything, it felt neutral, like history, not threat. But the broader pattern is hard to ignore. Houses on my street sit abandoned for years for no obvious reason. Our house apparently sat empty for about a decade at one point. One across the street sat empty for over 20 years. Now another nearby is sitting vacant again, in a desirable area. It's odd. Even inside our house now, my cats will sometimes fixate on corners like they're guarding invisible edges, like they're tracking boundaries I can't see. And the history around here, it's heavy. Parts of King Philip's War happened in this region of Massachusetts. My town had Civil War cannonball manufacturing. In the 1800s, it was a corridor between bigger cities where criminals passed through. There are documented indigenous sites nearby too. Wampanoag presence on the hills, artifacts and arrowheads found around the pond. So yeah, this place has layers. It felt predatory. It felt like something large, like something with reach, like something that can trail you from far away and wait until you're alone and tired and vulnerable. And the scariest part is this. Sometimes, even now, I'll be miles from home and get that same sense, like a distant pressure in the back of my mind, like something is out there, like it's hunting. And I wish I could tell you that sounds dramatic. I really do. But that night in the shed, when I woke up choking and the fear didn't leave with the dream, something in me shifted. Because for the first time, I wasn't just imagining a story. I was inside it. So, this happened a long time ago, around 13 years back, when I was about 6. I was spending the day at my aunt's place, the kind of house where you could just run outside and disappear for hours, and nobody panicked, because that's what kids did back then. It was me, my cousin Marin, she was around 12, my older brother, and my twin brother. And like we'd done 100 times, we decided to go mess around in the woods. Those woods were basically our playground. We knew the paths, the little dips in the ground, the spots where the trees leaned like they were making doorways. It didn't feel spooky, just familiar. At one point, Marin and I wandered a little farther than the boys. We'd found this narrow rocky cut in the hillside before, almost like the beginning of a tiny cave, and we wanted to see it again. Nothing dramatic, just kids being curious. The only thing that matters is that Marin and I were up higher on the hill than the boys. When we finally started heading back down, we heard giggling, then thunk, thunk, acorns pelting the leaves around us. The boys. They were tossing acorns at us like it was the funniest thing in the world. And they ducked into this half-falling apart shed they'd found. Old boards, leaning roof, the whole thing. So we couldn't even get them back. It was annoying, but in that normal, playful way. Then we heard my aunt calling for us, her voice carrying through the trees, sharp in that "don't make me come get you" tone. Marin and I started down the hill toward the shed, and the boys came shuffling out, still laughing like they were innocent. And that's when I saw him. Right behind my twin brother, like close enough that it felt like they were together, was another kid. A little boy, about our age. He was blonde, pale, and dressed different. Not like costume different, but like his clothes didn't belong in our time. I remember it so clearly because it stood out so much. A light blue shirt, kind of faded, and dark pants. Not jeans like we wore, just darker, plain. My brain froze for a second because my first thought was, who brought a friend? But we hadn't seen anyone else out there. No parents, no other kids, just us. So I tugged Marin's attention and said, "Who's that boy?" And she didn't even look in the right direction. She just glanced at me like I'd asked something stupid and went, "What boy? Your brother?" And I was like, "No, that boy, the blonde one behind him." Marin stopped walking. She looked at me harder, like she was trying to figure out if I was joking. Then she said, really slowly, "There's no one there." I remember this cold feeling crawling up my arms because I knew what I was seeing. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't a trick of the light. It was a kid, standing there, quiet, close. And then, this is the part that messes with me the most. When I looked again, it was like he just wasn't part of the scene anymore. Like my eyes slid right over the space where he'd been. I didn't see him again after that day. Not in the woods, not around the house, nowhere. So years pass, life happens, I grow up. And honestly, that memory becomes one of those weird childhood moments you file away because you don't know what to do with it. Then, this past year, I moved back into my old house, living there with my brother and my sister-in-law for a while. One night, it was just me and my sister-in-law at home. My brother was out of town for work. The house was quiet, normal, until she woke up in the middle of the night, completely shaken. She told me she'd had a nightmare. She opened the door, and there was a little boy standing there. Blonde, about the size of a first grader. She said she asked him where his parents were and let him inside, because in the dream, it felt like the right thing to do, like he was lost. And the second he crossed the threshold, he lunged at me. In her nightmare, he didn't hesitate. He just launched himself at me like he'd been waiting for the chance. She said she tried to pull him off, tried to get between us, tried to yell. Then she woke up. And while she was still catching her breath, still wide-eyed, still half in that dream state, I felt something in my chest drop. Because I didn't need to think about it. I just knew. So I asked her, trying to keep my voice calm, like I wasn't suddenly 1,000% sure of what she was going to say. Was he wearing a light blue shirt and dark pants? And she stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Then she said, "Yes." And I swear to you, I felt the same cold, prickly sensation I'd felt in the woods as a kid. That same sense of, this isn't random. I don't know what it means. I don't know if it means anything at all. But it's hard to shake the feeling that whatever I saw back then didn't just stay back then. And the part that keeps looping in my head, the question I can't stop asking myself is, why show up again now? And why like that? Because none of it makes sense. And somehow, that's what makes it feel the most real. I didn't grow up religious, not in the going to church every Sunday kind of way, but I always respected people who did. I was raised in this tiny, cornfield-surrounded town in rural Nebraska, the kind of place where everyone knows your business before you do. We had, I swear, more churches than stoplights, like 5 churches for maybe 600 people. And the biggest one in town was the old Lutheran church, beautiful, creaky, and way too quiet when it wanted to be. My best friend, let's call her Riley, has been in my life so long she's basically my sister. We met when we were kids, survived middle school together, and by the time we were juniors in high school, we'd somehow landed this job cleaning the church once a week. It was decent money, and honestly, it gave us this weird little pocket of time together outside of school. The first day we started was in late March. Still patches of snow on the ground, wind that cut through your hoodie. But that day was strangely warm, like the weather forgot what season it was supposed to be. Now, that church wasn't just a building, it was a maze. Technically 3 levels, a basement, the main floor, and this split level upstairs that always made you feel like you were going in circles. Long hallways, doors that all looked the same, little staircases that led to other staircases. You could walk 10 feet and suddenly forget what direction you came from. The worst, or maybe the most important, room was what we called the big room. It was like a cafeteria or fellowship hall, this massive open space with a kitchen attached and doors leading everywhere. Hallway, stairs up, stairs down, even doors to the outside. One whole wall was lined with windows, and during the day the light came in kind of soft and dusty. But at night it felt like those windows were just dark mirrors. Here's the thing. I've had strange experiences my whole life. Shadows where they shouldn't be, footsteps when nobody's there, that kind of stuff. I never went looking for it, but it always seemed to find me anyway. Riley, though, she wasn't like that. She was the practical one, the "it's just your imagination" friend. So that first day, she's wiping down the windows in the big room, inside and outside, and I walk into the kitchen to grab supplies. I glance through the doorway that connects the kitchen to the big room, and I see her standing there. And above her, like it's leaning over her shoulder, there's this dark shape. Not like a person you can clearly describe, more like a heaviness, a shadow that didn't match the light in the room. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like I missed a step. I didn't yell. I didn't want to scare her. I just walked out as casually as I could and asked if she was doing okay, like I hadn't just seen something that made my skin go tight. She looked at me, smiled like everything was fine, and kept cleaning. But that image stayed with me. Later that same night, we ended up in the basement. And the basement, I don't know how to explain it except to say it felt like the air down there didn't belong to the same building. It was a long hallway with doors on both sides, a couple bathrooms, storage rooms, and stairs at each end. The lights buzzed like they were annoyed to be on. Everything smelled damp and old, like mop water and paper that's been sitting too long. Riley went upstairs to refill the mop bucket, and I was alone down there for maybe 2 minutes. That's all it took. I heard someone say my name. Clear as day, not muffled, not imagined, just my name, spoken like someone was right behind me, but the hallway was empty. And then I saw it. At the far end, near the stairs, there was a figure, tall, thin, darker than the dim light should have allowed. It was barely more than a shape, except for the eyes. They weren't bright like headlights or anything dramatic like that. They were this sickly yellow like old glass. It leaned slightly, like it was peeking around the corner of the stairwell, watching me. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe right. And then, almost like the moment got yanked away, Riley came down the stairs with the bucket, chatting like nothing was wrong. The figure was gone. And the craziest part? We didn't talk about it. Not then, not for weeks. We kept going back every week, pretending everything was normal while the weirdness slowly stacked up like dirty dishes nobody wanted to deal with. It was little things at first. A door we swore we'd left open suddenly shut. Sounds in rooms we'd already cleaned. That feeling of being watched so intensely it made you want to turn around even if you didn't want to. Then, after a few weeks, we finally said it out loud to each other. We were standing in the big room, and Riley, voice low, like she didn't want the walls to hear, told me that on the first day, cleaning those windows, she had felt someone right behind her. Not just watching like they were angry we were there. The second she said that, I got goosebumps so strong it felt like my body knew before my brain did. And once we admitted it, it's like something in that church realized we could finally hear it. That same night, walking home, because I only lived a few blocks away, I passed the side of the church and saw a dead cat near the edge of the lot. And meanwhile, Riley later texted me that on her drive out of town, she'd passed a deer that had been hit. Now, out in the country, that stuff happens. It's not unheard of. But the timing, the weird, heavy coincidence of it, made my stomach twist. I couldn't let it go anymore, so I started digging into the church's history. Because part of me refused to believe a church could feel like that, like something rotten was tucked inside it. And one day, while dusting in a storage area, I found an old framed photo, black and white, worn at the corners, of what looked like the original congregation outside the church years ago. Most of the faces were blurry and normal, but there was one man who didn't fit. He was noticeably taller than everyone else, standing like he wanted to be seen. His expression was flat, but his eyes were wrong, dark, cold, almost hungry. And I knew that was the figure. The same presence, the same shape I'd seen in the kitchen doorway, the same kind of staring energy I'd felt in the basement. I showed Riley, and the second she looked at it, her face changed, like something inside her dropped into place. We both talked about quitting. Honestly, we almost did. But the money was good, and it was one of the only times we had that felt like ours. So we stayed. And that's when it got worse. Riley was involved in dance and cheer, so some nights she'd leave early for games and I'd finish up alone. During the day, the church felt unsettling but manageable. But once it got dark, it was like a switch flipped. That place would go from creepy to alive. We started finding strange things, too. Like dark, gritty lines along doorways. Almost like someone had sprinkled something and pressed it into the cracks. And once, this still freaks me out, we found a person in the building who absolutely should not have been there, ducking behind a doorway like they'd been hiding. And then Riley started seeing figures too. That's when the denial ended. Because if she was seeing it, then it wasn't just me. And eventually, it didn't stay in the church. That's what people don't tell you about places like that. How sometimes it doesn't feel like you're leaving when you walk out the door. It started following me home. I'd wake up at night feeling like someone was standing in my room. My mom mentioned hearing movement when nobody was awake. My little sibling asked, completely unprompted, "Who's that man?" while staring down our hallway. And I remember sitting on my bed, staring at my bedroom door, feeling this cold certainty settle in my chest. Whatever was in that church had noticed me, and now it knew where I lived. So, let me take you back to when I was about 10, maybe 11. My grandparents lived way out in the countryside, one of those places where there isn't really a town, just a few homes spread out along quiet roads, and everybody knows everybody else's car before it even turns the corner. At the time, my older brother, Evan, had been staying with them for a while. He had a computer set up in this little upstairs room, and whenever I visited, that was basically my whole world. I'd sit up there for hours playing Warcraft 3, totally absorbed, headphones on, forgetting the rest of the planet existed. One Sunday morning, late morning, like around 9:30 or 10, my grandparents were getting dressed to go to church, and I didn't want to go. Not even a little. I wanted the house to myself so I could play uninterrupted, so I did what kids do when they're determined. I faked being sick. Nothing dramatic, just the whole, my stomach routine. They hovered, they worried, they tried to persuade me anyway. But eventually they sighed, told me to rest, and left. And the second I heard their car crunching down the gravel drive and fading away, I felt that little rush of victory. Like, yes, perfect, quiet house, computer all to myself. Maybe 10 or 15 minutes passed, and then I heard something that didn't belong. The front door downstairs opened. Not a creak like the wind, not a little rattle. An actual, clear, open and swing sound. I remember how fast my whole body went cold. Like my brain just hit a wall and said, "Nope, stop." I didn't even move at first. I sat there, frozen, listening so hard it felt like my ears were straining. Then, as quietly as I could, I slipped out of the room and crept to the top of the staircase. Footsteps. Downstairs. Slow. Measured. Like whoever it was wasn't in any hurry. They walked a few steps, and then stopped. And that's when I heard the worst part. The sound I still remember too clearly. This dragging, scraping sound along the wall. Not banging, not tapping. More like someone slowly pulling their fingers across that rough, textured paint. Shook, shook, shook. Deliberate, unhurried, like they were taking their time. I swear, I didn't even feel like I was breathing. My chest was tight, my hands were clammy, and I just stood there like if I stayed perfectly still, I might become invisible. Then, silence. A beat. And the footsteps started again. Heavy, slow, crossing the downstairs space. And then, the front door closed. But it didn't end there, because right after the door shut, I heard a sound that made my stomach drop. A key turning in the lock. From the outside. Like someone had just locked the house. With me still inside. That was the moment fear turned into action. I snapped out of the freeze and moved as quietly as I could to the upstairs balcony, thinking, please let it be them. Please let it be them. Maybe my grandparents forgot something. Maybe they came back early. Maybe... No. Their car wasn't there. The driveway was empty. The road was empty. Just that still countryside quiet that suddenly felt huge and exposed. And I remember standing there thinking, okay, so if that wasn't them, who just came into the house and locked it? That place had always given me a weird vibe, like the air sat heavier in certain rooms, like the house held onto things. But that was the first time I felt it in my bones. Something was wrong there. Years later, I brought it up to my brother, Evan, who'd lived there longer than I had. And the second I mentioned it, he didn't laugh. He didn't brush it off. He just kind of nodded, like he'd been waiting for someone else to say it. And here's the thing. It wasn't just us. People who've spent time there, neighbors, relatives, friends, almost everyone ends up saying some version of the same sentence, that the place has a dark, heavy energy, like it's soaked into the walls, like it doesn't want you to relax. I don't know what it was that morning. I don't know if it was a person, something else, or just the creepiest coincidence imaginable. But I do know this. When I think back on it, I can still hear that slow scraping on the wall, and I still get that same feeling, like the house wasn't empty, like it never really was.